Okay, it's a couple minutes after 10, and I'd like to call to order the January MTA board meeting. General Counsel Paige Graves, would you provide an update on the quorum, please?
Thank you. We have a quorum, and I'll just note that Commissioner Fleischer, Commissioner Glucksman, Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Mack, and Commissioner Samuelson are attending remotely.
Thank you, Paige. Before we hear from the public speakers, can we have our brief safety announcement?
Your safety is of foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen to the following instructions. In the event of an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room and 911 should be called. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell D down the hallway past the elevators. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. Thank you and have a safe day.
Thank you. Now we want to hear from public speakers. Kay Contino?
Good morning and welcome to the MTA board meeting, public comment session. Today we will hear from public speakers both remotely and in person. We have 20 members of the public registered to speak today. As a reminder, we ask that all speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. The first speaker today will be Joe Kunzler, followed by Dante Nicolo.
Wow, I'm Joe Kunzler here. I am greatly honored to be your first speaker today. Sadly, I need to speak to you about several things that aren't all happy. But first, I want to congratulate the new chair on Jared Mano. His name escapes me. On getting the chairmanship. I think that the MTA needs stable leadership. I also hope that with Larry Swartz being forced out, that Lindsay Boylan is on the MTA board soon, please. Fingers crossed. But that's not really why I called. You have a problem with your subways. You do not have a barrier, as you can see here, between the subway track and the platform. You have a little warning track. Recently, there was a very tragic incident involving an Asian American lady who was pushed into the tracks and run over before she could get herself off. This is why you need at least a ledge, if not full gates, as soon as reasonably possible. It should not cost you billions of dollars to put up simple sliding gates up to at least belt height. I would encourage the MTA to prioritize safety, especially as you standardize your fleet. I know other transit agencies like TransLink and BART are as well. So that's the primary reason why I called. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. With 25 seconds left to go, I want to respectfully advise all your fans all around the world that this Sunday, TransitCon will be going down, transitcon.org. Sarah Meyer will be speaking, as well as other transit luminaries. Please put that on your agenda, transitcon.org. Thank you for having me today. My time has expired. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Dante Nicolello, followed by Matt Camper.
Hi. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the other board members. My name is Dante Nicolello. I'm a lifelong subway rider. Today, I want to talk about the failure of the new multi-million-dollar CBTC system in Queens. As you may know, subway trains ran a lot faster 100 years ago than they do now. We can look at vintage schedules to verify this. In the 1990s, trains were intentionally slowed down by New York City subway management, even though they received billions in fundings. Not you guys, but previous boards were derelict in their fiduciary duty to oversee New York City subway managers. They allowed management to slow trains down instead of permanent fixes to infrastructure, which would have allowed trains to operate safely at previous high speeds. This scandal was exposed in a Village Voice article I invite you to read. Only then did the MTA react, but half-heartedly. One of the solutions to fix this problem was the installation of CBTC. This is an old technology from the 1970s that allows central train control of operations. We spent millions on this, and now the trains actually run slower than before on the E&F line in Queens. I invite you to take a ride out to Jamaica and see for yourself. I asked a crew member why the trains have slowed, and he said it was the new system. He has no control over train speeds now. This CBTC system must be dealt with immediately. The next steps that the board can do right now is to immediately suspend any future CBTC implementations, claw back any funds already transferred to vendors that implemented
Please
CBTC
conclude your
systems
remarks.
on the E and F lines, investigate after millions of dollars were spent and
Please
now we have
conclude your
slower
remarks.
trains.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Matt Camper, followed by Cassie Rafucci.
Good morning, everyone. I have a couple of things I want to address this month. First, as far as the new MTA Chairman CEO, Jana Lieber, I want to congratulate you on being confirmed by the New York State Senate as our new MTA Chairman CEO. It is a well-deserved honor. I think you're going to make an excellent MTA Chairman CEO going forward. This agency needs leaders who care about the system, care about the riders, and want to make things better for all. And I believe you're absolutely the right fit for the MTA going forward. And I'm really looking forward to working with you and your team as an advocate going forward to make the MTA a better place for all. And the second and last thing I want to talk about is the LIRR. As you guys have known, the third track project has been going on for the last couple of years, and we had all kinds of different service changes. You know, I've been upset about the service changes when the entire main line is down, no shuttle bus is basically provided, and everybody is forced to either use the Hempstead, Port Washington, Babylon, or Montauk branches. Well, the next weekend is different. I'm very glad President Bill Lang, we've been addressing this for a couple of years now, and I know last December it was this plan, and I'm glad this plan is coming back. I hope this plan can continue going forward. And the only other concern I have is that Hall Place and Westbury customers don't get buses. Why isn't that? I understand you have a situation where you have nice bus, but there's no buses on nice bus overnights. And can you please look into having overnight buses at Hall Place and Mineola, since you have buses going through that area anyway, overnight on the shuttle buses? Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Cassie Rafucci, followed by Mr. X.
Chairman Lieber and board members, my name is Cassie Rafucci, and I'm a private citizen of Coney Island, Brooklyn. I would like to see an enforcement on mask wearing in the buses, trains, Metro North and Long Island Railroad and Staten Island Railway. I am extremely furious every time I travel on the train. I see riders not wearing masks. Also, I wanted to address an incident which happened on a Coney Island bound N train. I was touched by a homeless individual as I was about to get off my N train. And this individual harasses other passengers, and it's a constant problem. I would like to see a mass enforcement on all public transportation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Mr. X, who will be followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Just pick up where I left off in December when I told the current MTA head who could pass for Harrison Ford and Dave Lemon with a bigger nose and a smaller head, he can't suspend the J train below Hughes or Lorimer Streets because of the death trap. Talking about give him some pointers about that. And also on the day they hold the Brooklyn Midnight Parade on Graham Avenue, he needs to post signs at all B43 bus stops and deploy employees between Metropolitan and Broadway Avenues. This way they know what's happening. One rider asked me on the day the 2021 parade was held, the buses run. I said, go to Bushwick Avenue. Okay? And regarding the J train, this is how you do it. If it can't run across the Williamsburg Bridge, suspend it below Marsan. If that doesn't work, suspend it below Flushing or Murder Avenues. Just suspend it below Murder Avenue. Regular service between Murder Avenue and Parsons Boulevard. Murder Avenue, use the middle track only. 2 shuttle trains. One on the uptown track between Myrtle and Flushing House, both directions. The other replaces the M train, but let them continue their trip at Wyckoff Avenue. So between Myrtle and Wyckoff Avenues, both directions of the downtown track, above Wyckoff Avenue, both directions of the uptown track, since Wyckoff Avenue has 2 tracks and one on Plumfoot had a middle track but was closed many years ago. That's how you get things done. That's how you turn a negative into a positive. And I sincerely hope you do that from this point. I still hope you do it my way, not your way, from this point on. Because your way failed. Your predecessors made the same mistakes. And it's getting ridiculous. It really is. When you making the same careless mistake your predecessor made. Okay? And I'm glad the 2A puppet here is scheduled to start 6 p.m. I stated in the past they need to start after 6 p.m. So I'm glad someone finally listened on that level.
Please conclude your remarks. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Charlton D'Souza, followed by Mary Parsons-Lavelle.
Good morning. My name is Charlton D'Souza. I'm the president of Passengers United. And, we are very upset and angry with the MTA and with all of our elected officials because Michelle Go's death could have been prevented in the subways. And right now, our subways are in a state of emergency and a state of crisis. Every night, in every subway car, there's tons of homeless individuals taking up seats. Many of them are defecating and urinating. Many of them are strung out on drugs. And this is ridiculous. It's so bad that the cleaners are not being able to clean trains at the World Trade Center station and at many terminals. So what I'm suggesting is that the police and the social workers take them off the trains, let the cleaning crews clean the train, and that's it. That has to be done. And 400 mental health professionals are needed in the subways as part of the new SOS team. We need them immediately, not in April or May. We need them now. And everyone keeps talking about platform doors. Platform doors is only one solution to a bigger problem. So, if you have a platform door, a person can still be pushed by a mentally ill individual down the stairs. So that's not going to solve everything. What we need is 400 mental health professionals, and we need more police in the subways, and we need more property protection agents as well, protecting employees. A transit employee was beaten on a train, on a number 6 train, and the PA system wasn't working. And she was trying to radio control center, and no one came to help her, and the suspect got away. And then last night, an individual was stabbed on the subway in the leg. What the hell is going on in our subway system? We need leadership, and we need it now. Thank you so much.
Here, here.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mary Parsons-Lavelle, followed by Dorothy Zuniga.
Good morning. My name is Mary Parsons-Lavelle, Chair of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. Congratulations, Chairman Lieber, on your appointment. We've all heard about Governor Hochul's Interborough Express project. Although a great idea, this project must include cleaning up the filthy, toxic, and excessively noisy freight rail and waste by rail operations. Today, outmoded freight rail in the MTA's right-of-way is needlessly harming more than 1.5 million residents of New York City and Greater Long Island. The Long Island Railroad has received $27 million of New York State legislature money since 2013 to repower the New York and Atlantic Railway's high-polluting 1970s switch locomotives to Tier 4 locomotives. And they have still failed to do so. The Long Island Railroad has failed to put all the money it's received into the comptroller's contract DR 36644 and has had an open procurement that the Long Island Railroad says they can't talk about for the last 3 years. The new waste by rail business started in Long Island Railroad's Farmingdale Yard in 2008. And since then, the Long Island Railroad has allowed open rail cars of landfill-bound waste that emit waste blow-off, leachate, and odors to operate in the MTA's right-of-way without lifting a finger to protect residents. Chairman Lieber, you know that I've been coming here for years asking this board to spend the $27 million on a straightforward Tier 4 switcher repower, like the one the Port Authority did in Greenville Yard in 2015 and Waste Management did with the Economic Development Corp in 2018. The time has come to address these longstanding and needless harms to the communities as part of Governor Hochul's interest in utilizing the Bay Ridge Branch and
Please conclude
mitigating
your
climate
remarks.
change. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Dorothy Zuniga, followed by Bradley Brashears.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My concern is about share rides. When I'm on the smaller rides that have a number that starts with the number 9 or either the number 100, I am so nervous because there isn't enough room in these vehicles. On December 21st, I was in one of these vehicles. I was picked up first. My driver then picked up 2 more people. The first passenger, she was in a wheelchair. She sat right next to the driver. Her PCA sat next to me in the back. He had his window open in the back. I had my window open on the side, and also my driver also had the window open on the passenger side of the vehicle. I feel very concerned because these vehicles are too small. There's not enough distance between us passengers. So me putting the window down to get some fresh air kind of made me feel a little bit better, but I'm still very nervous. We don't know the status of any of these passengers that share the rides with us. I feel my health is in jeopardy, and I feel that the MTA doesn't care. And I think that people need to really think about this long and hard, that COVID is not going away no time soon, especially when you crowd these vehicles and we in there together and we're not knowing what the status of everybody is. So I'm concerned, and I hope the MTA does something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Bradley Brashears, followed by Lisa Daglian.
Good morning, board members. I'm Bradley Brashears, Planning Manager of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. We were heartbroken by Michelle Go's tragic death the other week. Our hearts and prayers go out to her family and loved ones. Before this tragic news, Governor Hochul and New York City Mayor Eric Adams detailed their new Safe Option Support Teams program, SOS. We're encouraged the city and state are addressing this problem together and that professionals are being deployed to help those in need. But we'd like to see the MTA, state, and city take it a step further and learn from peer systems around the country on related efforts. Years ago, I learned of Hub of Hope, a physical space within SEPTA operated as a 501c3 by Project Home in partnership with SEPTA, the City of Philadelphia, and others. It provides a safe place for those experiencing homelessness to be connected to the city and state services they need, as well as a space to do laundry, take a shower, get a hot cup of coffee, and be treated as humans. The city and state should learn from Hub of Hope and consider creating a similar program to help those living within our transit system. In addition to a physical space, mobile vans can be deployed to move such services between stations Our friends at Transit Center recently released a great report called Safety for All, detailing the hub and other best practices. Jose Martinez of the city also wrote about the program and others in a piece on Monday, both highly recommended reads. New York needs a program like this where all partners come together to better address the homeless crisis. The MTA didn't create this situation, and it cannot and should not solve it alone. With more targeted city and state funding for outreach and support programs, better housing, and even greater partnerships between all stakeholders, both public and private, our transit system can be a safe and welcoming environment for all. We hope that the Governor and Mayor's SOS program can evolve into a comprehensive approach to help those in need, just as peer transit agencies are currently doing. Please reach out to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lisa Daglian, followed by Valerie Joseph.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Daglian, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. Jano, congratulations on your first official board meeting as chair, and welcome Commissioner Velez. We look forward to working with you. Today, you'll be voting on a number of contracts that will support, maintain, and improve the system for riders on subways, buses, the Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. They include supporting the second phase of the 2nd Avenue subway, improving connecting services for Metro North, maintaining, inspecting, and repairing Long Island Railroad and Metro North escalators, professional services for SECRA and or NEPA related to congestion pricing, and so on. These investments are critical for providing safe and reliable service, bringing trains to underserved areas, and for a state of good repair and the overall well-being of the transit network that is so vital to our region. Together with hard work, improvements in technology, and a focus on customer service, investments like these have paid off with record OTP for both Metro North and the LIRR. We're seeing a similar return on subways, with all lines back in action, and a reduction in delays. More importantly, however, you have a social contract to ensure that riders are safe while using the system. We are encouraged by the commitment from the Governor, the Mayor, the NYPD, the MTA PD, and the MTA to work together to do just that. They say, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. So it's time for something new. The concerted approach to information sharing and deployment we heard about Monday are needed to make us feel and be safer. We look forward to seeing how SOS will work across the system, and how local providers will be engaged. The blueprint for success should have many pages and many parties. It should not have many fingers pointing at each other when something goes wrong, but a single point of responsibility per region. The city and state should staff up across agencies, including at the MTA, to show riders that they're the priority. An investment in riders is an investment in the transit system and in the entire region. That's the vote of confidence that we need to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Valerie Joseph, followed by Miriam Fisher.
Good morning. My name is Valerie Joseph, accessorized advocate for Brooklyn Center for the Independence of the Disabled, and also a member of ARG. COVID is still here. Omicron spreads easily and is still a real risk, especially in the close quarters for long periods. That is why on Accessoride, it is very important for these measures to be taken very seriously. I'm not there in person today. Why? Because I'm afraid of the COVID virus. I do not know who's around me, who's taken any of the vaccines, and of the like. I also want to urge you to please take these measures seriously and pull back on shared rides. Many of the important situations that happen when you get COVID are important because you can be dead. And I don't want to die being on a ride and not being safe. The MTA tells us they're having trouble getting drivers to provide rides. Maybe it's because the drivers don't want accessoride rides because they can make more money serving other customers. When we talk to drivers, they tell us that even with a recent small increase in pay, it is not enough. We know the MTA isn't made of money, but you have received billions in federal aid. Please use it, and use it now. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Miriam Fisher, followed by Iman Ramawi Doster.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Okay. Okay. Miriam Fisher, a disability and transportation activist speaking independently. I'd like to bring some things onto the radar. Ask Governor Hochul and our new Mayor Adams to appoint riders with disabilities to the MTA board and to the Congestion Pricing Traffic Mobility Review Board, people with experience with the needs of using public transportation and facing disability obstacles. The federal infrastructure bill has brought the topic of the revival of the Second Avenue subway back on the radar. The first segment was a multi-billion dollar project that took decades. An alternative model is light rail cheaper, faster to build, more easily made accessible than digging tunnels. And light rail in New York might be extended past 125th Street, 2nd Avenue to the underserved transit deserts in the Bronx were actually part of the original plan for the 2nd Avenue subway. The governor has herself on the new Interborough Express talked about rail, not digging more subways between the boroughs. Our neighbor, New Jersey, has light rail from town to town. There are European models, such as London, that built light rail in preparation for the Olympics and served underserved transit deserts in East London. We want assurance that the subway money won't be eaten up and squeezed out transit money for accessibility and elevators for those with the disabilities who don't have transportation options.
Please conclude your remarks.
Okay, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Iman Ramawi Doster, followed by Kara Girl.
Hi, good morning. My name is Iman Ramawi Doster, and I'm the Access Ride Coordinator and community organizer with the Disability Justice Program at New York Lawyers of the Public Interest. And thank you for allowing live video options for both the committee meeting and this full board meeting. Today, I'm here to talk about my concerns with shared rides on Access Ride, as well as assessment centers. As most of you may know, I'm an amputee and I also have lupus. And why would you put your most vulnerable customers, such as me, in shared ride situations where you cannot even come close to adhering to the 6 feet distance mandate? I've already lost 35 friends, most of whom were not disabled, but they still died because of COVID. And this new COVID variant is still rampant, and I don't want to lose any more friends or myself. I'm scheduled to do more chemo in March, and I won't be able to do the additional booster shots for several months because of that. And why would you keep shared rides when I still need to go to appointments during that time? Why put anyone else at risk? Hasn't COVID shown us that lives are more important than money? Also, assessment centers are very unsafe for the same reason. There isn't any social distancing going on in those centers. Why haven't you told customers with permanent disabilities that they can apply for permanent service and simply fill out a form and send it back in the mail? I didn't know about that until I was told. Why can't you continue the sound policy of temporary eligibility determinations, which you wisely instituted at the onset of COVID? Why have people come into a building during a pandemic when it's not necessary at all? Don't take away reasonable accommodations in the name of getting back to normal, since business as usual didn't, doesn't, and won't work. I also want you to listen to the drivers, because there's no service without them either. No shared rides. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Kara Girl, followed by Michael Ring.
Good morning. I'm Kara Girl, Research and Communications Associate at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. With Transit Equity Day coming up, we are pleased that Janos spoke this weekend about the MTA's role in creating a more equitable region. There's no doubt that public transit, especially buses, are the engine of equity and the backbone of New York City. On Monday, Acting Bus President Frank Annacaro said that 2022 is going to be a defining year for buses. We're excited about the plan to work with DOT to bring riders 5 new busways, 20 miles of better bus lanes, expanded TSB and camera enforcement, and more accessible bus stops. And with Governor Hochul's budget proposal including higher fines for drivers who block bus lanes, it's clear that the tools to create a faster and more reliable bus network are right in front of us. We're hopeful these improvements in enforcement will be enacted quickly so that more riders can depend on buses for a fast, reliable trip. A better partnership with DOT will promote equity and sustainability by supporting the many essential workers who depend on buses, while giving more outer borough residents better transit access. The Interborough Express and Queens bus redesign will help, but it's important to listen to riders whose lives will be most impacted. The redesign should include better bus access to LaGuardia from the Bronx and allow for connection to the Interborough when built. We also hope you'll push for the city to resume implementation of the Fifth Avenue busway, currently on hold, but still key to building a city that prioritizes transit riders. As much as transit access and reliability are important, so is affordability. This means better publicizing the Fair Fares program and raising the eligibility threshold to the city poverty level, bringing affordable transit to many more New Yorkers. It also means telling riders that more affordable commuter rail fares are coming soon with city ticket and other fare discounts, including, hopefully, adding free transfers to the subway and bus with our full Freedom Ticket proposal. Riders need a better bus network and more affordable transit as we continue to recover from the pandemic. The entire region and the MTA will benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Michael Ring, followed by Wendy Richardson Atwell.
Hiya, my name is Michael Ring. I'd like to give a visual description for people who need it. I am a 58-year-old white guy wearing a green hat and hoodie that say Disabled in Action, the organization I am representing today. I hope everyone here is having a good day. My day's been good because I was physically able to walk down into the subway this morning. I'm not always able to do that. I got in at Grand Army Plaza. I changed at Nevin Street, walked up the stairs here at Bowling Green, and was able to come to this meeting. But when I got here, I did something that I'm sure everyone else in this room did. I got in the elevator. No one here walked up 20 stories. There are hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers that can't go to work because they can't walk stairs. Accessoride, here, play a little mind game with me. Imagine if you had to make arrangements for when you would use this elevator a day in advance. You had to choose a time you wanted to come up, and you'd have to wait outside in the cold for up to half an hour before your appointment for the elevator was considered late. And then you'd have to do the same thing to go home. And if you want to go out to lunch, you'll have to do it in the middle of the day. I don't think anyone here would come to work. There are hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers who are not leading productive lives because they can't go to work. Accessoride is not an option. You need to stop fighting with organizations like mine about the elevators and start building them. Don't make a big deal over building 2 or 3 or 10 a year. We need hundreds of them. We need them to work. We need them to be maintained. Also, while I have 20 seconds, please open up the bathrooms. Everyone needs to use the bathroom sometimes. It's not a COVID excuse anymore. And the people who do take Accessoride, hey, Uber is not sharing rides, Lyft is not sharing rides. It's time to let people travel safely. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Wendy Richardson Atwell, followed by Ruth Lowenkron.
Good morning, MTA Board. Happy New Year. I'm here to January 10th. I was picked up in a Toyota, which had a passenger already in it. I was panicked. Yes, I had double mask on and gloves. I am a retired nurse, a health professional, so I know what I need to do. But when I have to get in a car that has no space whatsoever in it to go from Queens to Manhattan, I had my window open. She had her window open, and so did the driver. 14 days later, I got a notification from New York City Tracing saying that I had been exposed to somebody with COVID. I panicked. I have 5 autoimmune diseases. And all I could think about is, where was I? Who was I around? I don't go anywhere. I go to the doctors, I come back. I take accessorized. I cannot be safe if somebody is not vaccinated and you don't care. You don't care about the seniors who have disabilities. It has to stop. Something has to be done. You have to worry about this population of people, because guess what? We still use this system. It's vital. It's important. It's a necessity to our well-being, health, and life. Think about your seniors and your families. Think about your mother and your fathers. Please, thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ruth Lowenkron, followed by Omar Vera.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Lowenkron. I'm the director of the Disability Justice Program at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Our office is a member of ARG, the Accessoride Reform Group. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and thank you very much for making the opportunity to speak remotely, which of course was done in response to COVID, and we applaud that. I also want to congratulate Jano Lieber on his first foray publicly as the new head of the MTA. And we hope, Mr. Lieber, that you will listen to the calls of the accessoride riders and advocates. Just 2 quick questions for you. Would you, at this point in time, willingly enter into a car ride with a stranger who would be less than 6 feet away from you? Question number 2, would you willingly go to a center to be assessed for eligibility or go to a doctor's office or anything else where the center is so crowded that what should be a private room where you are assessed often has other people waiting alongside the perimeter less than 6 feet away from you? I know the answer for me is no, and I am vaccinated and boosted and don't have autoimmune issues. I'm sure the answer for you is the same. And I'll cede the rest of my time to you, the board members, or to Mr. Arroyo to answer the questions and tell us that you are going to support Accessoride's need to no more shared rides. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Omar Vera, followed by Michael Howard.
All right. Hello. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, please go on.
All right. Greetings, MTA board. Welcome to the January 2022 edition of your board meeting. First, let me congratulate the chair, General Lieber, for finally officially being the big boss of the MTA. Congratulations, and hope you do great. All right. Second, first, I'd like to discuss my support for the governor's Interborough Express, because Brooklyn, Queens, even the Bronx, there are areas of it that are like transit desert. They need to be better connected. Now, this proposal is only going to cover Brooklyn and Queens, but I'd rather they also cover the Bronx, just so that we can complete the route as planned. Third, I'd like to discuss like better bus connections to the airports. So first, like one of the previous speakers noted, it's time to merge the Q48 and the Q50 buses so that you can run service from Pelham Bay Park, Co-op City, all the way to LaGuardia Airport. But then also you should extend the BX41 bus, the SBS, to the airport. So therefore LaGuardia will have 3 SBS services, the Q70, the M60, and the BX41. And that's also planned. And also I'd like to note regarding the Port Authority's remodeling of JFK Airport. That's a good plan for them to remodel. But once it's done, I would suggest we start bringing express bus routes to the airport. from each borough, just so it would be easier for people like in the distant part of NYC to access JFK Airport, as it is a major airport. So let's bring some more express bus routes to the airport once they finish remodeling it, of course.
Please
That
conclude
said,
your remarks.
Thank you for your listening, and have a good one.
Thank you. The next speaker is Michael Howard, followed by Jason Anthony.
Good morning. Happy 22 to all yous. My name is Michael Howard. I prefer Mike. It's about mask mandates and heating maintenance. I still carry around extra surgical masks to provide for people who doesn't have any mask on their face or accidentally forgot it. Whenever I ride the R46s on the A line, mostly, and on the NQ and W line sometimes, it still doesn't have no heat. You know what I mean? On the cars, and I've sent emails to the customer service in this organization. R179s on the A line needs to add Fulton Street Express all times except late nights. But at late nights it goes low. I understand it goes local all the way to Far Rockaway. And I understand they have shuttle service from Euclid Avenue to Lefferts Boulevard. So it needs to say that in both directions on the R179s, just like the R46. At least R46 say Fulton Street Express on local. You know what I mean? And mean to say there should be more mask force on subways instead of just platforms. On trains, not just platforms. No.
Please conclude your remarks.
All right. Y'all have a blessed day, and I'll see some of y'all tomorrow.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Jason Anthony, followed by Gary Jung.
Good morning, MTA board members. Jason Anthony here from Amazon Labor Union. This time, my speech will be personal. Norman, pay attention, please. Because I've been ignored so many times, silenced by the media, and oftentimes ignored by some of you guys, especially Lauren Schwartz, who resigned in disgrace. And Robert, despite the fact that you and I had the conversation on the elevator this morning, you should come out clean being involved in the scandals that had to do with former Governor Andrew Mark Cuomo. Because it's unethical, and due to that, you shouldn't be on the board. I'm sorry to say this. And some people don't ride the subway system every single day like I do and be mistreated by NYPD in the subway and on the streets. But let's talk about the homeless situation. Some homeless people that I have seen in the system, they prefer to be in our subway system instead of the shelter because it's too dangerous, especially the Bellevue Men's Shelter at 30th Street. So, Jano, congratulations on your appointment, like I told you on Monday. And you should partner with the Department of Mental Health and Mental Hygiene and the New York State Department of Health.
Please conclude your remarks.
I will conclude, Kate. saying that we should develop a long-term plan to control the crisis once and for all.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys next month.
The next speaker will be Gary Jung, followed by Alexandria LaFleur. Oops.
Hello, all. My name is Gary Young, and I'm here to speak about the increasing level of fare beating I experienced throughout the city. Anyone in New York can probably attest to this. If you stand at any subway platform, any station for any period of time, if you ride any Staten Island bus for any period of time, you'll see people not paying their fares. I sent multiple emails, I sent multiple complaints to MTA, and it seems like every time I do so, it falls on deaf ears. I get the same generic email each and every time. I send over a complaint like it doesn't matter. So some anecdotes, I was on the bus in Staten Island. There was multiple days where I would be the only person to pay for the entire route, and people just walk in ignoring the operator. Is that fair? It certainly doesn't seem fair to me. I certainly didn't feel very intelligent when I put in my Metro card in the fare box when nobody else did. 49th Street on the N line, over a span of 12 minutes, was connecting from the N train to the R train. More than 30 people walked through the door, hopped the turnstiles. I never knew that MTA adopted a new fare policy, or maybe I never knew that MTA adopted a new fare policy that if you bring a bike, you could bring a family and a couple of strangers through a door as well, too. I mean, if that's so, maybe I should bring my bike and my entire family on the subway for one fare as well. This is absolutely ridiculous. It seems like the laws are not being enforced here. If the laws are not being enforced, why am I continuing to donate my hard-earned money to the MTA when it looks like other people are getting it for free? Why in this day of age, there's still low turnstiles that are not ADA accessible, so people wouldn't have to use the emergency doors when bringing large bags or people in a wheelchair? Why is it that no local buses, there's no enforcement of fare and people just feel entitled to get on for free? Safety is a major issue today on the subway. The recent passing of Michelle Go was tragic. I can guarantee you the suspect did not pay his fare when he entered the subway. I don't know how long I'm willing to continue to pay
Please
for
conclude your remarks.
when I see other entitled people skirt the fare. Think about honest, hardworking people next time propose a fare increase or request a budget.
Please conclude your remarks.
I hope everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Alexandria LaFleur.
Excuse me. Good morning, board, and happy 2022. I am Alexandria LaFleur, the access ride organizer for Sydney, the Center for the Independence of the Disabled of New York, and a member of ARC. Every day, I speak to consumers, coworkers, other agencies, and friends alike on their experiences with New York's paratransit services. The complaints, fear, and anger are all the same. Being left outside or in an unfamiliar area for hours on end, rude drivers who do not know how to properly communicate with someone who is totally blind or needs assistance opening and closing their wheelchair, and their grueling assessment center practices, especially during the worldwide pandemic. Disabled and elderly New Yorkers feel, work, live, and play the same ways as other New Yorkers do, paying the same $2.75 fare to get to the same offices, the same theaters and homes as everyone else does. So we continue to ask, why do these services seem to be overlooked and pushed aside over and over again? Why does it feel as though the MTA does not care how these thousands of people feel and are treated? We are pleading that you commit to speaking and working with real access ride users, dispatch workers, and drivers who face these challenges every day in an effort to include all parties in this change. The millions of dollars the MTA received is a great start to these challenges and changes. As long as the pandemic persists, hashtag no shared rides, don't kill us. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Lieber, that concludes the public comment session.
Thank you to the public speakers. You know, as I take on this new responsibility, I feel honor bound to acknowledge that one of the things that makes public transit in New York, I think, such a hopeful situation for all of us to work on. There's a long way to go. Is that we have an incredibly passionate and educated advocacy community represented by a lot of the folks who spoke today. So, there are a lot of tough issues that were raised, and many of them are controversial, but just that we have that community, I think, is a blessing to all of us in our work. I want to thank everybody for joining the board meeting today, both in person and remotely. As we've heard this morning and we've been talking about for a long time, our hearts are very much focused on Michelle Alyssa Go, the rider who lost her life just a week or so back. And we're going to talk a lot about safety today. But first, I want to acknowledge, and I think we all want to acknowledge, the tragic passing of two NYPD officers, Jason Rivera and Wilbert Mora. They may not have been MTA employees, but like all of the NYPD officers who, together with our MTA police, protect our riders every day, they are part of the MTA family, and we grieve their loss. So may I ask the board and everyone here to join me in a moment of silence to recognize their sacrifice. Thank you, everybody. Today is, we're talking about some serious business, but it's also a special day because we're welcoming a few new colleagues and a new board member while saying goodbye to others. First of all, I want to point out and welcome our new board member, my friend Elizabeth Velez. Elizabeth is new to the board, but not new to working with the MTA. As president of the Velez organization and as the chair, first female chair of the New York Building Congress, she's worked with this agency for years, including early in my time at the MTA, when she agreed to become a member of the panel that was selecting the design build contractor for the third track project, one of the projects that's actually turned out the best in all of our portfolio. Elizabeth's depths of experience and knowledge of the construction industry is going to really be a tremendous asset to us as we continue to deliver the capital program and all of the activities of the board. So welcome, Elizabeth. Can you give us a few thoughts initially?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Lee. And I'm smiling under my mask. I am incredibly proud and honored to be a part of this essential and impactful agency and to join the leaders on this board as we move forward with the challenges and the opportunities that are before us. As you had indicated, Chair Lieber, I have spent my entire career supporting the built environment of our region. And I've continually worked in and around MTA points. You cannot do work in New York City without touching the MTA in some shape or fashion. In my 30-plus years in the construction and the development sector of New York has led to leadership roles in advocacy organizations that support a better New York and a better New York City, which directly promotes sound and effective infrastructure investment, job creation, and importantly, innovation. I am also a resident of the Bronx and understand and appreciate absolutely transportation equity. In my professional life, I am also the second generation leader of a 50-year-old minority and women business enterprise based here always in New York City. And I understand especially and have tremendous appreciation for diversity and equity in procurement, and really have always given a round of applause to the great work of the MTA, which through intentionality and leadership continues to grow and strengthen our design and construction industry through inclusion, innovation, and investment. I heard one of the public comment speakers this morning say that the MTA is the engine of equity and the backbone for economic resurgency. I couldn't agree with that more. We're all keenly aware of how the pandemic has shaken us to our core, exposed health and wealth disparities, and has changed, for now, how we live and work. As our region's connective foundation, the MTA is central to our ability to rebound and not only survive, but to thrive. For me personally, I am motivated by opportunities that result from challenges, where initiatives can have the possibility of affecting tens of thousands of lives, and where we can collectively make a lasting difference. I look forward to the opportunity to roll up my sleeves, utilize my expertise and my experience, and my grit and passion for New York to continue to open doors and keep New York moving. I'm honored to be a part of this board. Thank you, Chairman Lieber, with all of you. A special salute to the essential men and women of our transportation system who've kept us on the move throughout the pandemic. They are the lifeblood of our economy. They keep us moving, and we owe them all a debt of gratitude. Thank you so much.
Well, clearly you already embrace so much of what you're already involved with, and your words reflect real expertise on so much of what we are trying to accomplish. So thank you and welcome. In the other direction, we are bidding farewell today to a couple of board members. I think this is likely to be the last board meeting for Kevin, who has been nominated by Governor Hochul to chair the Empire State Development Corporation. So we all appreciate Kevin, but I want to ask Kevin if you would say a few words.
Well, thanks, Jenna, and congratulations to you being confirmed. I think our region, our city, our state is very fortunate to have somebody like you, and I know the MTA will be in good hands with you. So congrats and good luck. As Jenna mentioned, Governor Kathy Hochul has nominated me to become the next chair of the Empire State Development Corporation. I'm supposed to have my confirmation hearing next week. And so I do serve on 3 other not-for-profit boards. And I still got to make a living. I still have a son in college. And so there's just not enough time to do 2 big state positions at the same time, so I do need to step down. It's been a fun 3 years, notwithstanding the tragic, the COVID pandemic and all of the terrible impacts it's had on our system and on the lives of a lot of our employees. When Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone told me 3 years ago he was nominating me, to be the Suffolk County rep, I was like, Steve, we've been friends for 20 years. Why are you doing this to me? I was so busy and I didn't think I had time, but I'm really glad he did, because I really enjoyed my 3 years here. MTA is like the off-maligned state authority that I used to run. People just don't get authorities, and it's easy to criticize them. And what the public doesn't get a chance to see is the dedicated volunteer board members like we have here, and all the time and the commitment that they put into this organization. The professional staff, I'm always so impressed with the staff. They take things seriously. They work hard. They get us the information we need. They get us the answers. And they really do a great job. And then, of course, all the great men and women that Norm and Vinny have introduced me to and shared with me about, who get us here on time, they get our customers here on time, they keep our trains safe, they keep our trains clean, and so it really is a terrific organization. I really think Washington, D.C. could learn a lot from a board like the MTA. We have Republican board members, we have Democratic board members, we have strap hanger reps, we have commuter rail reps, we have labor reps, and somehow we all respect each other, we listen to each other, we reach a consensus, and we're able to move this organization forward. And it's not an easy thing to do, but I think this board demonstrates, that we have done that. So I have 2 requests. One's parochial, one's system-wide. With my parochial hat on, I'm going to say in future capital plans, try to get the new Yaphank train station in there, and it's time for the Port Jefferson line to be electrified. If our Connecticut customers could have electric trains, it's time to bring Suffolk County into the 21st century with electrification there, or at least system-wide improvements. And then my system-wide request, if there's one thing that hit me at every board meeting, including today, is that all the speakers who would always come up and talk to us about the need for accessibility. And they really sensitized me to those important issues. I know they sensitized a lot of the board members. And so I think that's critically important. Randy Marshall from Newsday did a great column last month on the passing of our father-in-law who needed the accessibility. And she wrote about every day the things that we sort of take for granted is a challenge for people to get into and out of our system. So don't stop investing in accessibility. It's important. We need it. And then finally, I want to be invited to the ribbon cutting ceremony for the 3rd track and East Side Access later this year, because remember, at ESD, we play a big role in Penn Station, and you guys don't want have any issues there, right? So, but seriously, I look forward to being with you all at the end of the year for those two amazing projects. And, thanks for listening to me. We don't get a gold watch, but I did get 2 minutes to say and share some things. So thank you very much.
After your inspiring comments trying to muscle us on projects, we also want to acknowledge, there were a couple board members who wanted to say thank you. Neil, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair, and again, congratulations to you. Kevin, together we've represented the ends of this system for a while, and from that experience, it's clear to me three constituents will be very happy with you in your new role. The first is the public. You understand their needs, and you get that clearly. The second is businesses. I know you understand what is required for a business to be financially successful. And the third, I've noticed you're clearly focused on fiscal discipline. So the taxpayers will appreciate that. And so I'm pretty confident you're going to use the power of government to do the good things that government can do at the Economic Development Corp. You do that with humor. You just saw some of that. We basically shanghaied into inviting you to a ribbon cutting exchange for some generosity. So that's humorous, obviously. You're efficient with meetings. I don't think I've ever had as rapid fire of a meeting as I've ever been in when you chair committees. And your camaraderie, and it's sincere, and it's meaningful, and it's appreciated. So best of luck. We will miss you. I will miss you, and keep in touch.
Thank you. I know that Neil speaks for all of us. Kevin came to this board after a long-term service as the head of the Long Island Association, and he's represented all of Long Island and all the MTA region brilliantly. So thank you, Kevin. I also, Governor, last night, the governor's office announced that Larry Schwartz had resigned from the board. I just want to say, as Governor Hochul did, Larry Schwartz gave a lot of public service. He served, not many people serve as secretary to two governors, and he also served for 6 years on this board. He did a lot of work, and I just want to echo the governor in thanking him for his service. On the last of our personnel notes, I want to welcome new members of our senior leadership team. We announced, I think in the last week, that Kevin Willens, who just retired as the head of public finance for Goldman Sachs, is going to replace Bob Foran as our chief financial officer. And Kevin has not only obviously got tremendous expertise in this area, but he's been working as the MTA's financial advisor for 10 years. So he really knows us, and it's great to have him join us to partner with Jay, who's done an extraordinary job as we move forward towards a very challenging period for the MTA. So welcome to Kevin, who's going to be here in the next couple of weeks. I'm excited. Sitting next to me is the new permanent general counsel of the MTA, Paige Graves. Paige and I, we've gotten to work together, and she's been in several different roles, most recently as the chief counsel at the Long Island Railroad. And she's not only an MTA veteran who really knows us, but just a great person to have leading us with wisdom and clarity and good judgment. So thank you to Paige. Chris Pangilian has agreed to be our new head of paratransit, and paratransit is going to report directly to Craig, to the president of New York City Transit, rather than the historic arrangement where it reported through buses, which is, I think, a sign of our commitment to making sure we do well on paratransit and continue to make improvements. As you have heard from speakers today, there are some real hot button issues that we need to make improvements on. And last but not least, Kumola Arroyo, Q is with us. In addition to his responsibilities as Chief Accessibility Officer, is taking on additional roles with the title of Special Advisor to the Chair. And, I've worked a lot with Q in the time that I've been up on the 20th floor. He has enormous talents, and I want to make full use of him. So thank you, Q, for taking on these additional roles. Of course, I want to say that I am honored to have been confirmed by the State Senate last week. I want to thank the governor for entrusting me with this responsibility. I believe we've done some important work in the last 6 months, but clearly we have much more to do, and I think all of us are ready for that challenge. In a moment, I'm going to talk about safety, which is really on everybody's minds. But before we get there, I just want to acknowledge the major investment that the state made, that the governor made in the MTA through the executive budget. The budget released last week, and Robert is here and shepherded that through its whole process, significantly increases the state's contribution to the MTA's operating budget. For FY 2022, which starts in on April 1st, the increase is in the amount of $337 million, and it goes up from there in the following years, reaching $544 million additional by 2024. The financial commitment from the state is going to allow us to cancel the fare increase that was included for 2022 that was included in the November financial plan. That change, the elimination of the fare increase for 2022, is going to be reflected in the February plan. So thank you to the governor's office. Robert, please convey to everybody who worked on that for the MTA in Albany our great appreciation. We cannot, I have to emphasize, obviously, we cannot lose sight of the fact that we still have a huge structural deficit in the out years, in the $2.5 billion range, and that we need to keep working. The discussion has begun, but we need to keep working with the legislature and with the governor's office to identify new sources of permanent revenue that will enable us to continue to provide the same quality and quantity of service, and maybe even more and better in the future. Safety. We talked about safety on Monday, and I want to talk about it again. The tragic killing of Michelle Alisago it's tragic. But speaking for all of MTA riders, and that's part of my role, I have to say it's unacceptable. Unacceptable. MTA customers, and I have to say, this is not the only MTA customer who's experienced the horror of being pushed onto the tracks by, God forbid, somebody with emotional or mental health issues. We cannot tolerate senseless acts of violence on our customers. I've had numerous conversations in the last couple of weeks with the NYPD about the need to evolve the policing strategy. They are our partners, and that's the only way we're going to get this under control. You heard on Monday, and it was very important, you heard on Monday from the newly appointed chief of the Transit Bureau, Jason Wilcox. Together, we're going to be rolling up our sleeves on operational issues. We're not going to just have high-level monthly updates talking abstractly about statistics in every different category, but we want to truly work together now to share data, to identify the stations which have trouble spots, and there are a lot of them, to adjust deployments, to improve communication between the teams, and especially communication between the police, our operational professionals, and what we hope and expect will be large numbers of mental health workers who are coming into the system. We think that approach, a much more intense engagement with each other, is going to make a difference. But we're also going beyond policing. Several weeks ago, I asked Jamie Torres-Springer, the president of MTA C&D, to lead a cross-agency task force on track trespassing. This was something I had seen growing issues with across the system in a lot of different situations. The charge of the group is to identify strategies to prevent all varieties of accidents on the track, whether it's people being pushed or people wandering into the tunnels, which is also happening. I just got a break from my prepared remarks section. A month ago, we dealt with a situation on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, in East New York. Imagine getting on a train on the day after Christmas. Who gets on a train the day after Christmas at 6 a.m.? It's people who got to go to work. And they sat for 2 hours. They could not. They were between stations, and the track stopped because there was somebody with emotional issues who was prancing around on the track, and the cops couldn't apprehend him for 2 hours. So it's a safety issue, but it's also an issue for basic service to riders. and equity for people in East New York who are coming to work at 6 a.m. the day after Christmas. That made me crazy. So the group that Jamie is leading is going to look at latest technology, sensors to detect, track intrusions. They're going to look again at platform doors. And I just want to remind everybody, we have seriously been engaging on the issue of platform doors. There is a 3,000-page report which was looked at every single station to try to figure out if and how platform doors could be installed, how those stations would have to be adapted. So we take it seriously, and we're taking it seriously again. There are serious obstacles. There are problems with ADA accessibility, how the doors would undermine that. There are issues with the fact that we have a fleet which has so many different varieties of cars that actually aligning the doors in the cars is a problem. There are all kinds of issues, but we are going to continue to look at it closely. Jamie's going to update. As I said to you, we just started that, a month or so before the horrible Michelle Alyssa Go episode. But Jamie's going to update the board on that progress and some of those details at the February meeting. But the truth, if we're honest with ourselves, is that any of those investments, and many of them are worthy, but they will take years to come online. And our position is there's an urgent problem and we need action today. Today, we need an aggressive program that's going to help the people who are behaving erratically, who are terrifying riders right now on the transit system. This does not only fall on the MTA. It's the responsibility of all varieties of government, state, city, especially the mental health agencies and the homelessness agencies, to develop and implement effectively a comprehensive strategy to help these people and to protect riders and the viability of the system. I know that Governor Hochul, Mayor Adams, Police Commissioner Sewell understand the importance and the urgency of this issue. The mayor has been on the job a few short weeks, we forget. And one of his first actions was to stand with the governor in his first week of office and to commit to prioritizing safety on the subway. That was huge. The governor is now working hard to send additional mental health professionals into the system and to provide housing and service alternatives, not just outreach interactions. There's a lot of money that has been spent on mental health. It's no secret in this city. And there will continue to be spent on mental health and homelessness. We have to make sure that this results in execution and change. Before we move on, let me say we have great compassion. I don't want it to ever be forgotten. All of us, I know, at the MTA and on this board have compassion for these incredibly vulnerable New Yorkers. And we want to be part of a system that actually helps them. But we can't accept when they pose a threat to our riders and to the viability of the system. We need our customers to feel safe. It's essential for the city's economic recovery, the return to normalcy after COVID that we all crave, but it's also the minimum that we owe the public in the greatest city in the world. Apart from safety, we remain focused on delivering strong service to the public amidst the Omicron surge. The subway operations team, together with the ops planning team at New York City Transit, did a heroic job, to develop schedules and to implement contingency plans that enabled us to maintain service to all 472 stations, all of them, and all 16,000 bus stops, all of them, despite what were at times pretty significant crew shortages. This is no secret. The airline industry was in chaos. The supply chain was in chaos. The MTA served every bus stop and every train station. You've heard my praise about what the transit team, led by Craig, did before Omicron to bring us back to 94% service delivery amidst the crew shortages that were created by the hiring freeze when we didn't know if money was coming from Washington. But then they did it again and with new challenges during the Omicron surge. Rather than providing unreliable or erratic service throughout the systems, operations planning built a minute or two of additional headway into the trains, made sure that service was evenly distributed throughout the day, temporarily paused service on a few lines that provide, I don't like to say redundant, but service which duplicated the pattern in the B, the Z, and the W, and reassigned conductors and operators from those lines to support the rest of the system. They came up with a plan. This is what we want professionals to do, and it worked. They continuously monitored crowding on trains and readjusted frequencies to make sure that we served every part of the city. Thanks to those efforts, customers never were stranded. Nobody walked to a train station and found yellow tape across it closed. They figured it out. Now positivity rates are on decline. We're down to 7% of train operators and conductors out due to COVID from a high of 14% a couple of weeks ago. And we've been able to restore service on all of those lines, all of those special services that were impacted. I just looked at the numbers this morning. Demetrius and team are providing very detailed numbers on how many people they have for different roles. And literally, we're almost to the point where every slot is, there are always last minute situations where people call in sick late, but on paper, we've gone from, 10% shortages on some lines to meeting every slot with the extra folks that you have. So well done, guys, ladies. One lesson that I've learned in developing and updating these plans is that we need to automate these processes more. This is something that the Long Island Railroad and Metro North are doing, and we've talked to Transit about doing. I always say, and I'm sure there's some ignorance reflected in this, that the airline industry manages to adjust schedules with all the complexities of hours of service. Where do you cater? Where are the crews? What's the homes? They do that with the whole geography of the United States. They use technology. We need to have the best computer technology that gives us more capacity to constantly adjust service. Our team does a great job with the computer programs they have, but it's one area that I think we want to improve on. And Judy McLean and her team at operations planning are already looking at it and working at it. Last, I want to talk about the capital program and the incredible work that C&D did in 2021, especially in the last quarter of the year, to deliver on the historic $55 billion 20 to 24 program, as well as making sure we were getting everything done with the 15 to 19 program, which I remind everybody wasn't funded until halfway through 16. So we're really 5 years into that one too. The C&D president, Jamie Torres Springer, is going to give a more in-depth report in a moment, but we initiated, the headline is we initiated more than $8 billion worth of work in 2021, blowing past the goal of $6.2 billion that I set in my old job at the beginning of the year. The new capital projects included Penn Station access, 10 ADA stations, modern signals on the Queen Boulevard East line. Queens Boulevard West is almost fully in action, but now we've moved on to the eastern portion of that line. New electric, hybrid, and diesel buses, and a whole lot of work on tunnels, track, power, substations, flood rooms, and other projects that customers will never see, but which are essential to keep everything going to the state of good repair. We've also made headway on the Interborough Express and on 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2 to long hoped for. The 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2 is long hoped for. Interborough Express is a new entry in our much hoped for category. The feasibility study for Interborough IBX, as people are calling it, was released by the governor last week, and it found that it is indeed feasible to accommodate both passengers and freight on the Bay Ridge line alongside that will connect the Brooklyn waterfront through East Flatbush, through Maspeth, through Middle Village, transit deserts all, and connect them to the hub and spoke design of our subway system. We have a lot of work to do on community outreach for the Interborough and on the environmental review, and I look forward to working closely with everybody here and with our state and city partners on this project. Meantime, 2nd Avenue Phase 2 got one step closer to reality when the federal government finally, after 4 years of being held up, moved the grant request into the engineering phase, which clears the way for significant preliminary work to move towards groundbreaking. The board's going to be asked today to vote on something which is relevant, which are property acquisitions necessary for construction. We're acquiring 2 adjacent city-owned properties at 125th and Park, and an ancillary building as well. So those are the things that I wanted to report on. Thank you for hearing me out. And with that, let me turn it over to Chief Customer Officer Sarah Meyer, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the specific safety challenges in the system.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, MTA staff. In light of recent tragic events, I'm here to talk about safety in our subway system. Our customers are asking us to take a hard look at all of our processes to ensure we are doing everything we can to make the system safer. Even though serious crimes in the subway are still rare, one crime is too many. And as we heard from the comments today, our customers right now don't feel safe on the subway. They're afraid, and sometimes I'm afraid, especially when I have my 2 young daughters with me. This morning, I rode the train with a gentleman who was smoking in between cars. I was scared for him based on what I had seen and heard and what our crews have had to deal with over the past several years. Working with the platform controllers at Union Square, we convinced him to come back inside the car. But let's just say he wasn't a happy camper and caused a disturbance in the train as well. In our last survey, our current and lapsed riders said crime was the most important factor as they evaluated their rides, as well as their decision to return to the system. The MTA's success depends on us focusing and solving this issue. So what have we been doing on the MTA side? As Jano mentioned, our frontline teams in subways and buses work really closely with Pat Warren's team and the NYPD to submit requests and review reports of criminal incidents. We've installed thousands of cameras in our system and provided thousands of clips to investigators. We also review a range of customer complaints as well. Complaints that can be made through our Apple texting system, through WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, through 511 calls, and through our help point system. We analyze the data, we coordinate with local officials, and we tell our city partners where they should focus and provide resources and assistance. But every day, the pictures keep rolling in. The pictures you see here were sent in by our customers this month, asking for help. Our customers care about our city, our transit system, and their fellow New Yorkers, and it breaks all of our hearts to see pictures like this. Themes of complaints people are sending this month. People who are behaving erratically on the train or on the platform, and who are making them feel uncomfortable or even unsafe. Individuals smoking in train cars, doing drugs in train cars, doing drugs on platforms. Aggressive panhandling, especially without mask wearing. People setting up camp, not just on subway platforms, but on the floor of subway cars. This is a photo Jano took on the left while he was riding the Q train last week. At several stations, we have so many used needles on the tracks that we have to send out track cleaning every other day. When I look at these pictures, when you look at these pictures, there is no doubt that there are these people in need, and help can't come soon enough. As Randy, a 6 and E customer, stated, I cannot be the only person who believes the New York City subway crime level is out of control. Most of my colleagues avoid taking the subway because of crime, violence, and mentally ill people. What we do here at the MTA is run a public transportation system, and millions of people depend on us to get to their destination every day. That includes hundreds of thousands of school children. We owe them, and we owe it to them, to provide them with a safe environment. A lot of people ask, aren't there rules here? Yes, there are rules of conduct on our public transportation system. I didn't think people needed to be reminded of these rules, but here we go. Pay the fare. Stay off the tracks. Don't lie down inside the train or the station. Don't use drugs in the system or the bus system. Do not assault, spit on, or berate our workforce. Wheeled carts larger than 30 inches are not permitted. We all learned how horribly dangerous they are when Garrett Goebel was murdered in 2020. These rules were set up to make sure that our trains, buses, and stations are comfortable and safe environments. And as the riders keep telling us, these rules need to be enforced. And so we're asking, if you see someone breaking these rules of conduct, please help us by finding a police officer. New York City Police Commissioner Sewell has instructed police officers to patrol platforms and get on board trains. She's also asked police officers assigned to precincts to walk down into the subway stations to make sure everything's under control. They're here to help. They're here to make you feel safe. Please don't be shy about seeking their help. But most importantly, if you see someone behaving erratically near the subway tracks, near the subway platform, or if you see someone getting onto the tracks, call 911 immediately. If you see a blue light help point nearby, push that red button. The person answering is at the Rail Control Center, and they have a direct radio to the train crew. If you feel more comfortable, you can always speak to one of our station agents or an MTA cleaner. If you prefer to type, send us a tweet, send us a text. We have the most amazing, hardworking folks standing by. If we want to help get help for those experiencing homelessness, or connect someone with other social services, there's the 311 app. There's the 311 line. The city and state are now collaborating to provide additional mental health resources. And those resources will be routed and deployed through the 311 system. So please keep sending those reports in so we can make sure that every New Yorker is given the services that they need. Back to you, Jano.
So I want to give the board a chance to ask questions, but let me just say that last night, I went to the end of the E and the JZ lines at Parsons, Archer, Jamaica Center, and Pat Warren and John McCarthy rode out on the train, and we met out there and walked around, which is a pretty big complex. It's an end-of-the-line complex where a lot of this, the people who are riding that train, in part because it is indoors the whole way and it's a long line, the volume was quite extraordinary. I mean, we're talking about, I saw 30 to 40 people get off of trains and just, and they were asked to leave because the cleaners have to get on. And they just get on the other line. And some of them, and obviously we have compassion for them, the vast majority of them mean no harm to anybody, and it's just heartbreaking to see people in that condition. But there are also some folks whose behavior and whose, and the way they were conducting themselves, will be alarming to other riders. And there were cases where they wouldn't move and people were unable, struggling to clean the trains. And then we walked around with the woman, Tamikwa, who is the station manager, and looked at different parts of the station and the encampments that she has to deal with and call the PD in. And we had MTA PD also assigned to that station. And the fear that her cleaners have in going into certain areas. This is a serious situation that we have to deal with. I know probably pre-existed COVID, but it's clearly gotten worse. And it just really, for me, brought home what a dire situation we're facing with these conditions. Board members, questions directed at Sarah, I invite at this time. Commissioner Hall.
Not a question, but thank you, Sarah, for just laying out the problem that we all know exists, but you've just put it down on in front of us. And I think the onus is on us to solve this problem.
I have to say that the MTA, when you say the onus is on us, but in partnership with
In
the social
partnership with
service
everyone,
agencies,
right,
because
exactly.
we
The
need
NYPD,
the
Homeless
partnership.
Services,
Yeah.
HRA, the City of New York. We have to. I think the time has come. That's
Board
all I
Member
have to say.
Mahika.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to congratulate you, Jenna, on your appointment. And I think Sarah's presentation here, right, is eye-opening in the sense that we're acknowledging a problem that has existed for some time. We've talked about extra police, both on the MTA and for a couple of years now, met with resistance on the outside and on the inside. We've talked about the homeless problem before, met with resistance on the outside and the inside. We had shut down service, had them removed in a compassionate way because we have to deal with it. The state is providing additional funding. You working in partnership with the NYPD, new administrations all around, right? So we have new leadership everywhere. So I think the fact that we're actually shining a light on the problem, recognizing for the first time, I think, in reality, what has been going on for some time, and now I think with your leadership here, and I think, and for the board itself also, for us to acknowledge, right, these are things that we've known have been there. We haven't dealt with them in earnest, but we can't do them on our own here. But we have partners all over who at least are all acknowledging it, and hopefully we deal with them in a forthright fashion because COVID happened, we want people to come back, but they're not coming back to this. So I want to thank you for basically bringing it back to attention, and I think we should all just look at, some of the decisions that have been made in the past, and going forward, recognize what the problems are, and deal with them directly. So, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Lynn.
Thank you, Jano, and I want to express my appreciation for yours and Sarah's insightful commentary on the problem. There's so many times when issues are presented and people have very different views of what the problems are. And I think what is compelling today is how the speakers and you and Sarah all talk about the same things. Everyone has a common view: the tragic death of Michelle Go, the increased subway assaults, the widespread homelessness in trains and stations, frightening behavioral health issues, the never-ending COVID crisis, the rampant fare evasion and turnstile jumping, and frequent use of slam gates for entrance. All these things are inextricably mixed, and everyone's recognizing it. And I will admit there were certain times I've been on some sides of issues and others have been on others. What's clear today is how common everyone's view of what the problem is. There's also what is common, I think, is a lot of tools have been suggested to solve this problem, and to solve this not long-term but short-term. The continued NYPD surge is clearly important. The better and targeted NYPD deployment on trains and platforms. Expediting the full complement of the MTA police that was authorized a year and a half ago. And we're bringing them on board at this point. The use of civilian workforce had been talked about, and I think clearly it's done in other jurisdictions, of people who can be at the entryways and can provide both explanations of where to go and what to do, but can also surveil who's using their Metro card and who is tapping in or not. The issue of social services and bringing together social workers along with others, and the state behavioral health teams. I mean, all these things are critically important. We've talked about end of line and how important it is to do something or actually going back to where we were, that we are at the end of the line. We provide services, and we make sure that people get off the train and can go to housing, and not just congregate housing, but housing that they're willing to go to, and that we can outreach to hotspots like Penn Station. You, Jano, the governor, the mayor, Transit Police Chief Wilcox have all proposed these essential elements. And the question to me is, and pardon me for sort of going through all this, but the question is how we put all these things together. How we turn 8, 9, 10 programs into ones that work. And I would suggest that there ought to be, whether it's Sarah, whoever is the person, there ought to be a subway safety czar to coordinate all these programs. And we ought to think very much about someone with the responsibility for solely that. They wake up in the morning and they go to sleep at night thinking about these issues and how to coordinate these programs. I also think, and I know it's been discussed by people before, of creating subway safety CompStat. And I know that data can be used to forget problems, but data can also be used to solve problems. And I really do think that we need to CompStat, a computer statistical analysis of where subway fares are being, where people are jumping turnstiles, where there are homeless, where there are specific problems, and make sure that the right services are going there at the right time. So I think the programs are terrific. What I think is necessary is the MTA be central coordinating this and coordinating the data on this, and then monthly presenting to the board the results of that data. So I applaud everything that's going on, and I just hope we can move it to a degree where everyone is working together. Thank you.
Others wishing to comment? Mr. Borelli.
Thank you. I appreciate your report, Sarah, and I think what we saw in pictures here is what we all see every day, and we hear from our friends, neighbors, and relatives. So it's not news to anybody on this board. It's certainly not news to me. Bob, I appreciate your comments and the ideas you had, but I'd really like to hear some action items. What are we actually going to do more than talk? Because right now, it seems like a lot of talk, and I know everybody's invested in solving this problem. It's getting riders back on our system, and unless they feel safe, it's clearly the message. They're not coming back, and it's getting worse every day. So, I mean, I know you don't have an answer today, Gianna, or your terrific staff that's here with us, but I think over the next 30 days, we really should have an action plan of these are the things we're going to do and recommend and implement, not just chat about as we sit here and all acknowledge that we have a problem, because we know we have a problem. It's obvious. So that's really what I would ask, that we come up with a more specific plan that we're going to implement immediately.
Well, just let me just be clear from my standpoint. The fact that the governor and the mayor stood up the first week of the mayor's term and said we are subway safety is a priority, and we're putting cops on platforms and on trains, which was not always the case, and that you heard the newly appointed chief of the transit police of NYPD come here on Monday,
or committee meeting,
the committee meeting, and describe that commitment. That was a major action item. Now, I think Board Member Lynn's comments about coordinating all of the other activities that are being discussed and set in motion for a fully comprehensive and coordinated point is well taken. Other comments? Mr. Tessitore.
Yeah, I just want to take 30 seconds to bring up what I brought up in committee on Monday. You know, our employee safety. I mean, our customer safety is absolutely the most important thing. We get that. And while we're protecting our customers, we have to be mindful of our employees. In your earlier comments, Chairman, you had a picture of the subway conductor with a little square sign next to the window, which has been a very vulnerable thing for subway conductors, for commuter conductors. Just being in that window has become a dangerous place. Just being open to spitting and punching and people running off, and it's happening. And it's repeat offenders in a lot of cases. And there's a little sign next to that subway conductor that says assaulting an MTA employee through the penal code, you're subject to 7 years in prison. I'd love to know the last time someone went to prison for 1 month for assaulting an MTA employee. Everybody around this table has a DA friend, has prosecutor friends. We have to do something to make people more accountable when they do get caught. And we have to stand behind our police force and make sure that the train patrols are funded and we do what we need to do to get a flood of that type of assistance in the system. Employees can't enforce these policies. We have to know that. We can't. The leading reason why our employees are getting hurt is because they say to somebody very respectfully, you need to put on a mask on. In today's world, that gets you smacked. We can't let that happen anymore. We make announcements, we stay away, we keep far. But, I know this board is on board and appreciates the employees in our system. We have to stand behind our employees while we protect the customers and provide the resources we need for our police department.
Board Member Albert.
Thanks, Jano. I think the theme of what you're hearing from everybody is we all have to work together, social service, the city, the police department, the MTA, and I think we should also get our riders involved. And Sarah had a terrific presentation and showed the various ways that if you're a rider and you see something that doesn't look right, you can report it. I think we should have those flashing on the out front signs periodically, on a regular cycle, and let riders know if they see something that doesn't look right, they can tell a police officer, they can hit the help point, they can text, they can email, and I think we ought to keep pressing that home. You can help make the system safer.
Thank you. Anybody else?
John?
David Mack.
Yes. Hi. Number one, congratulations. And Kevin, I'll miss you, but I know I'll see you in Long Island for sure. I'm not going anywhere yet. I heard everyone, and I agree. But with my 50 years in 3 different police departments, state police, Nassau County, and the city of Long Beach, there's nothing more important than a deterrent, and that's the blue uniform. So, secondly, of course, anyone not obeying the rules and assaulting and etc. has to be dealt with. And we have to keep on the backs of law enforcement and the district attorneys. Thank you.
Other folks wishing to comment? Okay, thank you. I think this is a useful discussion. It just highlights our unanimity, I think, as Bob said. So we're going to keep pressing, and we will come back with this as a top item for reporting in the next board meeting. I'm going to throw it to Jamie Torres Springer to report on the capital program.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's been 3 years since MTA Construction and Development was created as a standalone capital delivery entity, and I'm pleased to have recently joined the organization, but to be joining at a time when we're able to start reaping the benefits of that innovation. And I'm excited to report to you today about some of those outcomes from 2021 and plans for the years to come. Last year was a banner year for MTA Construction and Development. We initiated, as the chair mentioned earlier, over $8 billion in project work when we include support costs for the Penn Access project. And again, the chair mentioned the total commitment figure beats the target for 2021 by 23%. And I want to really thank every department at Construction and Development. It's the result of their extraordinary work. That takes us to now 14% of the current capital program committed, which is great considering that really 1 year of that was almost a total loss because of COVID disruption. 86% of the 15 to 19 plan committed, and 96% of the core 10 to 14 plan has been committed. Some of the highlights, which again I'll go quickly because the chair mentioned some of them, contracts awarded for accessibility improvements at 12 stations. We're deploying every tool to promote accessibility. We're very focused on this. There's $5 billion in funding in the current capital plan to achieve accessibility at 71 stations. And through 2021, we've already awarded 32%, or a third of the ADA stations that we committed to in the 20 to 24 capital plan, again, despite losing almost a year to COVID. That's very impressive progress, and we're going to keep working on it. Of course, we awarded design-build contract for Penn Station access. Work is underway. There's early construction activity coming up this spring at the Leggett interlocking area to prepare for the construction deployment of the rest of the project. We awarded a $500 million contract for signal modernization and communication-based train control on the QBL East line, Queens Boulevard Line East, which will join in the to-be-completed Queens Boulevard West line to provide more efficient and reliable service on the F and E lines. And I just want to mention, it was mentioned in public comments, CBTC is proving to be very effective in speeding up trains. On the 7 line, on-time performance increased from 68 to 91% after implementation of CBTC, and we saw speeds increase by 8 to 14%. Of course, I think it was mentioned about the Queens Boulevard Line West. That project's not finished yet, so when it finishes, we expect to see very similar impressive results. We're very focused on state of good repair. We always have to make sure that we dedicate our efforts to that while also focusing on the big mega projects. And I think that's evidenced by 40% of our commitments in 2021 being focused on state of good repair, including mainline track replacement here at 63rd Street and Jamaica. On the sustainability and resiliency front, the chair mentioned, we announced a procurement in May for 60 electric buses, which is the latest step in the ongoing mission to transform the fleet to a zero-emissions fleet by 2040. And I want to mention, before that, the first phase of Metro North's train shed rehabilitation program is getting underway through a partnership with JP Morgan Chase as they redevelop their Park Avenue headquarters. I should note that the train shed's roof, as I'm sure the board has heard before, has reached the end of its useful life and will need to replace the entire structure in the coming years. That's really the next mega project that we have to do. We've been working with key stakeholders on this new project and looking for ways to accelerate it and particularly identify funding opportunities. There are also benefits which we've been talking to stakeholders in the city about, giving us the opportunity to rebuild Park Avenue and its malls in a higher quality way that will be great for East Midtown. So we'll be talking to you more about that. On the resiliency front, we've been working on a stormwater task force with city agencies to assess our preparedness and issues that we have based on past flooding events, including Ida this summer. The team has visited 144 stations to date and worked to identify opportunities to make smaller interventions, such as raising curb heights and stairs and fixing drainage problems that were the cause of a lot of that flooding during Ida. But I want to note that we're also looking comprehensively at assets and neighborhoods together with city agencies to improve their resiliency. And when we talk about resiliency, we of course are talking about multiple hazards. That heavy rainfall event, but also extreme heat, coastal flooding, high winds, other climate-related issues that we'll have to deal with in the future. So, but I am pleased we've been able to handle a lot of issues. For instance, at the 157th Street station, which you see flooded during Ida, we installed new backflow preventers, which ensure that water only flows into the sewer and not out of the sewer during a period of heavy rainfall. Of course, you see us removing what's called a fatberg from the drainage pipe at 207th Street, which was likely the source of flooding there during Ida. So we're working with the city to identify funding for some of the harder fixes that we couldn't just solve on site, and we'll be reporting back on that in more detail later this year and also engaging the board on that in these coming months. We had a strong year for diversity in our contracting, with 66 contracts awarded under the Small Business Mentoring Program and completing $41 million in contracts. And I'd like to also welcome Board Member Velez to the board and look forward to collaborating with her on and other board members on these issues as I had the great privilege of being able to do during my time at the city. So we're seeing favorable trends in our procurement strategies, which does reap the benefits of the various innovations that C&D was established by Chair Lieber to set in motion. Here we're showing you that we've saved 2% on the median design build contract versus our internal estimates. That actually represents 945 days of savings in time. And we've also found that using the A and B form of contract, A plus B form of contract, which requires contractors to include opportunities to deliver projects faster in their bids, that saved us 21% over what we had estimated for the projects. Overall, that's an 8% median savings, which we're very pleased with, and we intend to continue to take advantage of. I'll say this also has underlined the value for us of having flexibility about which model we use to deliver projects. And we're pleased that the governor recently proposed legislation that will raise the threshold above which the MTA is required to use design build contracting to $200 million for new projects and $400 million for replacements and rehabilitation work. We certainly get a lot out of design build, as we're showing. We intend to use it wherever we can, but we also will be pleased to have the flexibility to use other contracting methods like A plus B to be able to deliver as appropriate. I'll also mention we had a lot of completions, $4 billion worth of completions through year end. That includes 3 new subway stations and 4 commuter railroad stations made accessible, eliminating grade crossings and opening the new Elmont UBS Arena in November as part of Third Track, which of course will complete this year. Replacing 3 overhead bridges in Mount Vernon on the New Haven line, and major station rehabilitations completed at White Plains and Port Jervis stations for Metro North, fire safety improvements in the Hugh Carey Tunnel, and a pier fender replacement for the Cross Bay Bridge. Some highlights on completions. We are, for this year, projecting completions, of course, on the East Side Access project and revenue service at the end of this year. Our team at C&D is working in close collaboration with Long Island Railroad as they put together their service plan and begin their operational training so that readiness is achieved on time. And I really want to thank Phil Eng and his entire team for collaboration on this complicated project as we move it into revenue service. We mentioned Third Track, of course, allowing us to realize the full potential of East Side Access and creating reverse commuting opportunities, on track for completion this year. And then, as the chair mentioned, so I won't dwell on it, Second Avenue Subway Phase 2 entered engineering phase and will be moving the project both through the federal process and advancing early utility work in 2022. And Governor Hochul has directed us to begin the environmental review process on the, I'll start using the acronym, the IBX, and we expect to come up with our locally preferred alternative this year and initiate environmental review. Very excited about this project, as are many of the stakeholders that we've talked about. I wanted to note in closing that as we deliver on our projects, we're also thinking about how to build an organization at C&D that is a cutting-edge public delivery agency. Last year, I've mentioned some of the impressive progress that was yielded by standardizing contracts for design build and A plus B bidding, created a new building code for transit station projects. We adopted cutting-edge project management practices for more accountability and faster decision-making, and that includes how we work with our partner operating agencies, which is really key to our ability to deliver. I've begun to set some priorities for my time at the agency and for this year, highlighted here, certainly containing costs and reducing schedules, and we have various audits and work by board committees that provide us guidance on that, but we want to really look systematically at the drivers of major costs and come up with strategies to manage or reduce them, as we're now doing with alternative contracting models, with bundling of our contracts to achieve economies of geography and scale. We also are beginning to look at our insurance costs with the time associated with utility relocations, with our force accounts, and with our design specifications and standards. These are a whole series of areas where we expect we'll be able to make gains in the years to come. We're also planning for future investment. Next month, we'll be coming back to the board with an update on the 20-year needs assessment, which is to be completed by the end of 2023 in advance of the next 5-year plan. I do want to note that we're also putting the systems and culture into place to ensure a high-quality, valued workforce that manages projects aggressively and takes real ownership of projects from initiation to closeout. That's really key to a new organization being sustainable over the long term, and I'm excited about the opportunity to do that. Of course, continuing to support diversity in contracting and consulting, which helps us to achieve our goals because it makes a more competitive industry with a greater supply of potential contractors. And then, of course, delivering projects safely, which is work that is continuously a focus for our team. And this year, we're building out a comprehensive safety management system across all of the business units at construction and development, something that's very important and much needed. In closing, I thank you for the opportunity to update the board. And Chair, as you mentioned, I'll be back next month to update on the work of the Track Trespass Task Force as well.
I'm going to still invite the board members to ask questions, but I just want to acknowledge what you said, which is all of this work gets done only because the folks who operate these systems give outages and collaborate to provide resources and flagging and shuttle buses and everything. So Jamie's giving a report about C&D, but sitting beside him are the folks who make it possible to deliver capital work, and that coordination is hugely important. Any board member comments or questions? Board member Law.
Thanks, Jano. I remember when Jano was being elevated to CEO, I was like, oh, that's great, but some of us had a concern. What does that mean to C&D? And Jano said, don't worry about it. I got a great guy coming in. And Jamie, at least me, very reassuring. Your comments, you seem to be all over everything. So, great. Welcome aboard, and sounds like you're off to a great start. I just had a question on the buses, the electric buses. What's our timetable to have an all-electric fleet? And then, two, how are they so far with maintenance compared to the old buses? And three, do the charges last at least an entire shift, or just curious about that?
Well, I'll start, and also I'm sure Frank will have some comments. Really, the answer is that we're at a moment where we've begun the procurement for 60 buses, but we really are in the midst of planning, and it's a very complex multi-agency process to figure out how we get to 2040, including really seeding an industry to be able to produce the buses for us. So I think we'll learn a lot from these 60 as we both procure those 60 and then build out the charging infrastructure that we need for it. I don't know, see if Frank wants to add anything.
So for this capital program, we have 500 buses, 500 electric buses that are planned. Right now, we're working on strategies to go out to bid for those buses. And then 2040 is the full deployment of 5,800 buses is our target, which we're going to make. As in regards to the maintenance, it's new technology. As quick as the existing technology comes in, there's another level of technology coming out. The 15 buses we have in service right now, they're showing promise. They're not at the reliability rate of our existing hybrid or diesel fleet, but we're working through it, and that's what's important. We find out what these issues are. We work with the OEMs, and we cultivate so that the incoming buses are better than the original fleet. Maintenance, same thing. Maintenance is it's less in certain aspects, but it's still to be determined because the life cycle is still early throughout the whole industry. So that's evolving to our overhaul processes and whatnot. But intuitively, there's no internal combustion engines, and also we're seeing that it'll be less maintenance, but it may be more capital or overhaul investments in the future. Okay. Thank you again for a great presentation. Without any further questions, I'm going to move to the regular board business, and hopefully we'll dispose of it in our customary speed. The minutes, Mr. Albert, of the December board meeting of each committee have been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections or omissions?
I told you about one this morning that I won't go over now, an important one. Also on page 14, the former Bronx Borough president is referred to as Ruben Diaz. The junior is missing, and that's about 10 or 12 times on that page, so might want to add that.
Yeah. And we love and appreciate Ruben Diaz Jr.'s support for the Penn Access Project, among other things, so we want to get his name right. Thank you for that. If there are no further corrections, minutes are approved as distributed unless there's an objection. That matter is concluded. The Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Mr. Mack, can you report, please?
Good morning. Yes. Mr. Chair, the Bridges and Tunnel Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There were 3 procurement actions being brought through the committee, Bridges and Tunnels, and for a total of $4.4 million. The committee recommends these items to be moved, and I would need a second.
I second.
All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries. The Joint Railroad Committee, Mr. Law, your final act, sir.
No, the penultimate final act. Mr. Chair, the Long Island Railroad Committee and the Metro North Committee met jointly on Monday and report the following. There is one action item this month. The item requests board approval to enter a contract to accept a congestion mitigation air quality grant from the New York State Department of Transportation. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries. Kevin.
There is one competitive item for $31.8 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries.
This concludes the Joint Railroad Committee report.
Thank you. Chair Mahaltzis, the Transit and Bus Committee.
Good afternoon, officially. Chair Lieber, the New York City Transit and Bus Committee met on Monday, and there are no items to report this month.
God bless the Transit and Bus Committee, Chair Mahaltzis. Mr. Zuckerman will report on the capital program committee, no longer oversight.
Yes, we've changed the name, yes. Mr. Chair, the Capital Program Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There is one competitive procurement item for construction and development for $11 million. This committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerman.
Sir.
The Committee on Finance, Mr. Law, is ultimate action.
Filling in. Good afternoon. Chair Lieber, the Finance Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There is one action item this month. The item seeks board approval for a new master cost recovery agreement between New York Power Authority and the MTA on behalf of itself, its subs, and affiliated agencies. The committee recommends this action, and I move it.
Second.
I second.
Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries.
There are 2 competitive procurements for a total amount of $18.5 million. I'd like to mention that one item, procurement for the MTA independent auditor, is also recommended by the Audit Committee. The Finance Committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries.
There is one real estate action item for this month described on pages 58 through 67 of the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends this real estate item, and I move it.
Second. Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries.
This concludes the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, sir. May I now have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Thank you for the second. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
We give you Jano Lieber, the chairman.
Okay. Good afternoon, folks. We just had a pretty important board meeting. It was important. There was less business being transacted than normally has, less contracts, less technical business being transacted. But we talked about the issues that really are highest impact to the MTA right now. On the positive side, we recap what I think folks already know, which is that the new state budget that the governor has issued has enabled us, put us in a position to cancel the planned fare increase entirely for 2022. We're going to have a full update of the consequences of what the state gave us in the new executive budget in the February plan, but that was incredibly positive news for the public, obviously for MTA customers, and for our battle to get ridership back, which is, the centerpiece of our mission. The second issue that really was the focus of this board meeting is safety, which is that our riders are telling us, and Sarah Meyer's presentation I thought was very powerful, our riders are letting us know that they don't feel safe. And they're letting us know on Twitter, they're letting us know by the texts they send us and the pictures they send us and what they're saying to each other. And they're also saying that their comfort and their sense of vulnerability is affecting and will continue to affect their willingness to get back in mass transit. And that has huge implications for the region, for its ability to recover, and obviously for the MTA. So those were the things that I thought made this a really consequential board meeting. Last month in December, we had a ton of huge business that we accomplished at the end of the year. Today, we talked about the huge issues of, as I said, of the fare, which is good news, the progress of the capital program, which is good news, but of the real safety challenges facing our riders right now in the system. Tim.
All right, Jano, let's start this afternoon with Michelle Kasky of Bloomberg. They're tag teaming you. Skylar Woodhouse, her colleague, sitting right next to her, but we'll start with Michelle. Good afternoon.
Hey, Jano, thanks.
Hi, Michelle.
And so I know there was a lot of talk about safety today, and you anticipate, an update next month. So I have two questions. One about the safety is, you're saying that you're looking at the adding the barriers to the platforms. How realistic do you think that plan would be to incorporate those throughout the system, or at least through part of the system? And then my second question is in regard to flooding.
Okay. Well, as far as the realism of incorporating platform doors, we've been looking at this for a long time because we are looking at all kinds of ways to make the system safer. We have a 3,000-page study that I think we've just provided shared with the board, and we're going to provide to all of you. That study shows that there are a lot of physical obstacles, and bottom line, only about 40 to 50 stations could be equipped right now based on those physical obstacles. And we're going to continue to study, is it possible to do more, and how quickly could we do it, and what would be the advantage. But what our riders are telling us, Michelle, is they want solutions now. And as important as, as the physical and technological barriers that we could put up might be, right now we have a crisis of rider confidence brought on by the conditions on the mass transit system, and also by that very prominent and horrible subway pushing episode at Times Square where Michelle Go lost her life. So we're looking for action now, actions that can be taken. And the good news, a positive step is that the NYPD has stepped up to say they're putting people, as we have been asking for quite some time, in areas where the riders feel vulnerable, which is on the trains and on the platforms. Riders are not telling us they're telling us about some of the conditions in the mezzanine. They're certainly telling us about the problem of fare evasion and how it feels unfair that a lot of people aren't paying. But mostly they feel vulnerable on the platforms and on the trains, and the PD has now said very explicitly that's where they're going to focus, and that is good news.
And then about flooding, I know it was a number of months ago you gave us an estimate of how much the storms cost you from last year in Ida, but you've also been evaluating, and Jamie was saying that next month, he's going to give an update on sort of the overall how to fortify the system and so to prevent the flooding issues that the MTA experienced last year. And so my question is, what has been the cost analysis, the estimate of what the MTA is going to need to spend in order to avoid those major flooding issues?
Okay, so let's just be clear. What's been studied, and you'll hear more about it next month, is 100-odd stations that have historically suffered from had flash flooding episodes, right? Those specific stations. And flash flooding it's unpredictable, but that's what we're studying. What we're finding is that some cases it's things the MTA needs to do, right, to close up, to deal with blockage of drains or grates that are pouring water into the system, because frequently the way that drainage is working at the street level has broken down, that the piling asphalt on a road has eliminated the curb, so the design to drain into a DEP drain isn't working. So we're finding issues that the MTA needs to deal with. We're also finding issues that our brothers and sisters in the city government and the DEP and the DOT of the city need to deal with, that is affecting the first protection, which is proper drainage at the street level. Then we're also finding the bigger issues, which is in some areas, the drainage system of the city, the stormwater system, doesn't have the capacity to deal with flash floods, with the level of rain that climate change seems to be producing more frequently, right? And that's a bigger issue, but it is a city government issue. So it's not yet, we haven't figured out exactly what the MTA has to do. In many cases, it's other partner agencies. Is that responsive?
Well, Jamie was saying we're working with the city to identify funding for some of the harder fixes that we couldn't just solve on site.
Yeah.
And we'll be reporting back on. But you guys must have just an estimate of just how much it's going to cost to bring some of these 100, subway stations, to strengthen them.
Truthfully, I don't know that offhand, but I'm happy to check if we yet have an estimate of what specific MTA issues come out of those 100-station reviews and whether there's a cost estimate of what's associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the Zoom machine there, Jano. Harold Barnett of Bond Buyer, attending his very first MTA news conference, has replaced the retired Paul Burton. Harold, good afternoon.
Big shoes to fill, Mr. Barnett.
Very big shoes. I had a couple of questions. I guess the first one is more technical. I wanted to just ask a little bit if you had some details about next week's remarketing on going to the SOFR note.
I don't.
Okay.
But Pat McCoy, who runs the finance side of our CFO operation, I'm happy to put him in, we put him in touch with Mr. Barnett so he can answer Mr. Barnett's question. Okay?
That's great.
Okay.
The second question I had was, could you talk a little bit about Kevin Willens, who's the new CFO?
Sure. Kevin is somebody that, again, not to lean on credentials too much, but he was the head of public finance for Goldman Sachs. He's also somebody who served as the MTA's financial advisor over the years. He worked very closely with Bob Foran, who is, obviously our CFO and a bit of an MTA legend. So I think that, the benefits are self-evident. You've got somebody who knows the MTA financially, who has enormous credibility in the marketplace as the MTA as a financing entity, and who's known in the industry as a fabulous guy to work with, who gives good, thoughtful advice and is a problem solver. So we're thrilled that Kevin is joining the MTA as a second career. It was reflecting, and it was in our discussion, his interest in public service after he'd served in the private sector for many years.
All right, over on your left there, Jano, it's Anna Lay from the New York Times.
Anna.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yep. So the MTA continues to struggle, to bring back riders. Does the MTA have like a worst case scenario plan? How bad can this get? And what mitigation plans do you have in place to tackle that?
Anna, I'm certain you're following it. We're actually making a lot of progress since the bottom of Omicron. We're almost at 50% of pre-COVID ridership today. We were at 60% when Omicron hit, and we've already added back roughly 10%. We've gone from, at the bottom of Omicron, we were about 40% of pre-COVID weekday ridership. So that is an indication that the trend is quite positive. The overall trend of our whole system is we're moving back to the trend we were in before. I think the question you're saying is, are we going to reevaluate the projections that we were operating on? And I think the answer is it's premature for us to say that. We want to get out of this Omicron phase and revisit it with knowledgeable professionals. Remember, our original projection, which held right up to the beginning of Omicron, working with the pros at McKinsey, included both epidemiological projections and economic recovery projections, and they held for, a year and a half as accurate, more or less accurate. So we will come back to, the pros with that same level of input and expertise to re-examine if we have, but right now it's premature.
What if things get worse? I mean, they're getting better now, but what if they get worse?
I think our responsibility is to project based on facts, not to imagine, scenarios just to make up scenarios. So we're going to talk to the pros who are epidemiological professionals and economic projection professionals. As I said, before Omicron, those projections held. Now we're going to reevaluate them with professionals in light of where we stand.
All right, we're going to head east to Alfonso Castillo with Newsday. He's on the Zoom celebrating the second day of his January 25th birthday. Alfonso, good afternoon.
24th. Don't make me older than I am. So a couple things. One, a very simple, I guess there's a forecast of a pretty major storm coming this weekend. You're first as the permanent chairman of the MTA. Can you talk about, and I know it's still a little early, but what your focus, what your priorities are going to be in leading the agency through this storm?
So, Alfonso, thank you for the question. And I just remind you that when I came in August, I had Hurricane Henri and then Hurricane Ida, and we've had a couple of other weather events. So we're pretty. We've had a lot of experience as a team in preparing for weather emergencies and extreme weather. We run a pretty strong drill. We have a whole set of communications protocols about when we check in with what level of detail. The agencies actually have pre-developed storm scenario preparations that they put into effect, and we will start we are starting the cycle of communications that plans out exactly how we're going to manage through those. Now, part of that is the work that the agencies do to pre-deploy equipment. You've heard this before. Pre-deployment of equipment to locate key equipment like the trains and systems that allow you to clear the track, the things to make sure that the switches are clear, for example, on the Long Island Railroad, which are more weather and temperature sensitive. All of those preparations, which have paid off really well in the past, are going to continue. The railroad has had a very good run of managing weather. One of the highlights was Ida, where they shut down only a portion of the system for a little while, and then we're back in action the next day, a few short hours after the rain stopped. So, Phil, is there anything you would care to add?
No, Jenna, I think you covered it very well. I mean, obviously, all of the agencies have been monitoring the storm. We're continuing to watch the track, Alfonso. And as we get closer and the weather reports come in, we will continue to advise and work across the MTA. As Jano mentioned, we are preparing all the staff and preparing all the equipment. Salting of the platforms and all the facilities will begin on Friday. Protect engines and all the equipment will be checked. And we'll be messaging with the public as the weather becomes a little more, the weather reports become more confident. And, the intent is to do as we've always done, provide safe, reliable service and make sure our customers are informed at the right times.
All right. And if I may, Jano, second question, a lot of discussion discussion today and in the last several days about safety and homelessness in the system has focused on the subways. But as I'm sure you know, this is also a big issue for the Long Island Railroad. The customer satisfaction survey last year, I think, identified that as the #1 problem among Long Island Railroad commuters, particularly in Penn Station, but also heard a lot of complaints and concerns about this issue in substations on Long Island. Can you talk about, what if any unique challenges there are in addressing this issue in the Long Island Railroad system where NYPD doesn't play as much of a role?
Well, there's a couple of things that we've done. One is we've increased train patrols on the Long Island Railroad, both to deal with those issues of folks who are, whether they're misbehaving or they don't belong in the system, or they're using the system as a hotel. We say compassionately, hopefully. We've got more MTA PD on the trains than we did in the past, and I'm talking closely to the conductors. Phil is in touch with the workforce. Obviously, I've spoken to the conductors, the union reps especially, and they're seeing the presence of the cops on the train. So that's partly to address that issue. In Penn Station in particular, I went to Penn Station at 7 a.m. last Saturday to talk to the police, the MTA PD who policed Penn Station at the time of their morning roll call. And the message that I have to them is, that I had to them and I have to them is, this is the one place and only remember, one of the challenges of Penn Station is it's multi-jurisdictional, right? A lot of the challenges that your Long Island Railroad, your readers and Long Island Railroad customers are experiencing are what's happening at the surface level, which is, all kinds of, whether it's drug use or disorder around the station, but on the streets outside the station. Then there's also areas that both NJT and the Amtrak areas are policed by the Amtrak police. The MTA only has control of the Long Island Railroad areas, but that's what I said to them is, this is the one place in the system where we control, where we, at the Long Island Railroad level of Penn Station. And it has to be a place that our riders get the message that we're going to do everything in our power to make sure they have a comfortable, safe feeling experience as well as an actually safe experience. No question that is part of the challenge is with the construction going on, it doesn't feel, the configuration of existing Penn, which is why Governor Hochul has talked about we need to change Penn Station so it doesn't feel as much of a dungeon or a basement, or it's not as visually and intuitively hard to move around and navigate and feel comfortable in. So, but, obviously we have to negotiate all that out with Amtrak and get that project going. In the meantime, we're talking to our PD about the need to maintain in the Long Island Railroad area, the areas we control, a maximum feeling of safety. And we're going to be dragging in all of those mental health professionals that have been talked about coming into the system to help us deal with, the few folks. When I went there at 7 a.m., Alfonso, there was literally there were no folks sprawled out in the Long Island Railroad area. I did go into the NJT area, and there were half a dozen folks spread out, and I sent messages to my counterparts at NJT to let them know. So we're trying to make sure that our riders have the best possible experience, and that's what I can commit to you.
All right, Alfonso, happy third day birthday. Let's go to Kevin Duggan, AM New York. We're back in the city. Kevin.
All right. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hi.
A couple of questions. I'm going to start off with a kind of a simple one. At the beginning, there were a lot of public speakers asking that MTA suspend accessorized ride sharing. I was wondering if that's something you've considered at all, at least while the numbers of COVID are still high, or is there any obstacle to that right now?
Yeah, the obstacle, first of all, what people don't understand is that paratransit in New York has changed over the last few years. It is no longer all about those blue and white vans which carry a lot of people and make a lot of stops. It's 70% of our paratransit rides are provided in for-hire vehicles, in black cars and taxis and green cabs and so on. So most people are having are very different, and most of them are having a solo experience in a car through the broker assignment process that is being sent to pick them up. 15% of those for-hire vehicle rides are shared rides. Why? Because we don't have enough drivers. We don't have enough cars. So while we have, we're totally sympathize with the fact that some people would rather ride alone, we couldn't answer all the calls at this time, if not for that. But I think that the important point is the overwhelming majority of paratransit riders are getting a for-hire vehicle, a taxi ride, and they're getting it alone. We're going to keep trying to make sure we get more drivers and more cars through the. I think, as you know, we've moved from one provider to 4 companies based on a procurement we did last year, and now we hope that as COVID subsides, we'll have more drivers, more cars, and be able to deal. But just remember, the other thing is that one of the goals of ADA and of the whole accessibility agenda is to provide equivalent experience. So when people say, I'm very respectful of the fact that some people feel more averse to having, being in close quarters with others. But, we got 2.5 million subway passengers every day who are sharing public space in an enclosed environment with lots of other people. So, I just want, as we try to give everybody on paratransit their own car, just remember that there are also, the equivalent is 2.5 million people on subways and 1 million plus people on buses who are sharing public space in the public transit environment.
Thanks. And then my second question goes into the big topic today about homeless people on the subway. You talked a lot about being compassionate, action now, but I feel like I didn't really hear anything. And also, this is something one of your board members raised. I didn't hear anything about what the MTA itself is doing or wants to do about this. It's all about like what police are doing or what the state outreach workers are doing. Have you considered anything that the MTA could do? Like there was the story in the city about what SEPTA has been doing with a room for where people can do laundry and shower and stuff like that. Kevin, is there anything about like reopening
with all
subway
due respect,
bathrooms? Or
I don't know how long you've been in New York, but New York City and the New York State have been running drop-in centers for a long time. There are a lot of them, and a lot of them are around Penn Station. A lot of them are around Grand Central, and a lot of them are offered by, religious institutions, right? So please don't write that New York doesn't provide drop-in centers like Philadelphia. Please don't write. Please hold on.
Yeah.
Please don't write that the MTA is not, the MTA workforce is not doing anything. If you stood last night, as I did, at the Archer in Sutphin, the Jamaica Center station, and watched MTA cleaners try to work their way through a car that is full of people who have camped out in this, and try to do that without getting into any confrontations or any difficulties with people who are struggling with mental health issues. If you look at our conductor workforce, who's, as was pointed out by one of our board members today, is managing information flow about all the impacts of this situation on ridership and on service. If you're, I don't think that that's entirely fair to say that the MTA, just because we're a transportation agency who doesn't operate a social service facility, is somehow not doing anything. What we're trying to do is to cooperate with the professionals who are responsible for delivering social services and delivering law enforcement, and to continue to protect our passengers and to deliver service for them. So please don't convey to your readers that the MTA, because we're doing our job and we have been imploring the professionals who are responsible for both social services and law enforcement to do theirs, is somehow pushing it off. That's not fair, and I hope you won't write it.
are there any? But my question was more like, and one of your board members asked, like, what are the actions we are going to do? Do you have any plans to do anything new or differently that you haven't done before as a transit, like what the MTA is going to do differently.
All right, well, I'm going to invite Sarah, who deals with this every day, all day, to talk a little bit.
Thanks, Kevin. So we have an enormous amount of effort that's put in collecting data, in talking to our frontline workforce, as well as our frontline workforce is doing all that they can to get services to people, calling the BRC, calling DHS, calling NYPD, sending emails to NYPD. The amount of time and effort MTA staff puts into this issue far outweighs the efforts that they're putting into transit at the moment. And that, to me, is a big red flag. And we need more resources and more support from city and state partners to be able to focus on our core mission, which is to deliver safe, reliable, and clean transportation.
We're going to go back there to Christy. You have one more thing?
I'm punctuate by saying, again, I hope because, our job is to fight for the passengers, but don't forget that the governor and the mayor stepped up and said specifically that they were taking on responsibility for the law enforcement side of this and the mental health side of this. So it's appropriate. And the reason I'm getting a little hot with you, Kevin, is our workforce is scared. In addition to our passengers, our workforce is struggling because they are feeling vulnerable. Because when they go to clean, they turn a corner and they're coming upon conditions that actually, that with people who are unpredictable. So let's try to bear that in mind as, in addition to what Sarah is talking about the effort that is taking just to manage this situation.
All right, next one, Jano, is back there. Christy Kalishian from CBS 880 Radio. Christy.
Hey, Jano, and I don't know if you or Sarah can answer this, but earlier the question about the platform doors, you were saying that riders need to see something now, something more immediate. That's going to be a long-term probably project. But what can you tell riders is something that they can see now? What, after this meeting, is there a first thing that you're like, we must do this first? What can you tell riders who are asking, what are we going to see now? What is the immediate thing that you probably think that riders should see first and probably will see first?
I think you're going to see is what Mayor Adams promised, what Police Commissioner Sewell promised, and what Jason Wilcox, the head of the Transit Bureau of NYPD, promised, which is cops on trains, cops on platforms. Our riders, 123,000 riders responded to our last survey, and overwhelmingly they said safety was their number one issue, and the number one way to address it was a uniform presence in the system. And that is coming, and that is our first step to what we hope will be a more comprehensive approach, including mental health services and homeless services that will move people out of the system.
How soon would you say?
It's already begun. I was out on the system yesterday and came upon cops on the platform in 4 separate stations. I hadn't seen that in that frequency before, and also my Pat Warren, who's our Chief of Safety and Security, and our Director of External Affairs, John McCarthy, rode out to meet me at Sutphin Archer last night, and they also reported the same thing. We've got cops on platforms in numbers we have not seen in a long time.
All right, we're going to go back to Zoom. David Meyer from the New York Post is standing by. He's either rocking FDR over his shoulder or maybe one of the early presidents of the MTA. I'm not sure.
It looks like a late Santa appearance, but whatever.
I don't know what any of that is about. It is FDR. So on the topic of the outreach workers, BRC, the organization that the MTA and the city contracts with, its work has been described variously as shoddy and ineffective by the comptroller and the inspector general. Specifically, it seems like the people that the outreach workers make contact with accept services, maybe they end up in a shelter, and 2 days later, they're back in the subway system. So my question is twofold. Do you have any evidence from your conversations with the governor that that approach is changing, that these people will be given additional resources that will actually ensure that they don't end up in the subway system? And second question, aside from simply going into the system and removing all these individuals, what is the MTA's goal to simply that this population no longer exists in transit? And how is that actually achievable? What is the measurable outcome here that you can say in 1 or 2 or 3 months, like, we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish.
Well, I'm not going to quote New York Post editorials, but I'm pretty sure that your paper editorialized that this week that we need to move the population out, we collectively, not the MTA alone, and to provide services so that they don't have a reason to come back. Look, this is not going to be, happen overnight, but what I think you heard from the governor, and it's reflected in the planning for these SOS teams, is that they intend to have people who have access to and manage supportive housing and housing systems so that folks can get into programs, then they can get services and ultimately get housing. So it's too early to say what the percentage of recidivism or return or whatever you would call it would be, but it is a stated goal of that the state and the city have outlined to provide services and housing at a scale that will, result in a real permanent reduction of this population in the mass transit system.
All right, let's move on here to Jose Martinez down the line from the aforementioned The City. Jose.
Good afternoon, Jano. You mentioned, as far as the workforce goes, that they're also feeling vulnerable. Would you be able to expand a little bit on efforts to protect operators who are in operating cabs from encounters like the ones that we described in our story in The City today? Thank you.
Well, I read the story, and number one, we do. One thing that needs to be clear is that there is a check. Part of the protocol before a train goes into service is that they check the intercom system to make sure it is working between the conductor and the train operator. So, I don't have specific knowledge of what went on in that case, but that is absolutely a protocol that it must be confirmed to be working. The issue of the latch on the door that your source talked about is one that the MTA, apparently in that class of cars, there is an issue with the door being too easy to dislodge, and they've actually been doing that systematically with that car class for some months. Demetrius Craig present to tell you exactly how long, but that is an agenda item to, for whatever reason, that latch is not strong enough to withstand some of the people banging on it hard and trying to break through. So that is actually something that is being dealt with, yeah.
And the incidents that have occurred, has it been mostly limited to that car class?
I don't know the answer. I can all tell you that, like, the MTA, the idea that our workers are being assaulted is totally unacceptable to us. We have supported for several years now increasing the penalties for assaults on transit workers. Last year, it was in the state Senate as a one-house bill. The state Senate supported it. It didn't get enacted into law by both houses, and we're going to be supporting it again because we think that attacking, a transit worker should result in, real penalties. And as one of our board members said, nobody can remember the last time someone went to jail for assaulting a transit worker, and that's not right.
All right, let's go back to Zoom. Danielle Moyo-Dunn of Politico standing by. Danielle.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I have two questions. The first was just about, Jana, you mentioned in avoiding the fare increase that a lot of that was due to the increase in the state budget by $337 million. I just wanted to clarify, was that from an increase in tax revenue, or was that the state allocating more funding for the MTA? And what is the total amount in the state budget allocation? And then I have a second.
So the answer is that the way this works is two of the taxes that subsidize the MTA's operating budget, the so-called MMTOA, which is Metropolitan Mass Transit Operating Assistance, and the gas tax, the petroleum business tax, were reprojected. Now, those reprojections are historically commitments that the MTA has been encouraged and permitted to rely on as commitments from the state government. So that is what allowed us to say we don't need to do the fare increase this year, which I think I've shared with you, we don't believe is a good business practice given the fact that we are still trying to come back from COVID. So, so that's the way it was accomplished. It was incredibly good news. Not going to shock you that we hoped and politely requested additional assistance, but it came back in a bigger number than we had even hoped for. And it also is improving our out-year projections, although that work, exactly how much it's going to improve things for the out years is still, work in progress, and we're going to be able to tell you where we are in February.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. And then the next was just to follow on Michelle's question on resiliency. I mean, I know you had mentioned in your presentation that or Jamie mentioned in his presentation that, another thing the MTA is starting to look at is stuff like how extreme heat, how to prepare for that. So could you just talk a little bit about that, like about your efforts outside of the flooding efforts, what you're looking at in regards to extreme heat or other extreme weather challenges?
I'm outside of looking at, well, you know what we did. It was literally billions of dollars that we invested in coastal resiliency, which has been a huge success. We have literally installed all kinds of things to, and I think we've enumerated them with you in the past to make sure that if, God forbid, there is a coastal surge, that it doesn't permanently damage train stations or train infrastructure. I remind you that when you're dealing with freshwater, which is what you're getting with flash flooding, the danger of permanent damage to railroad and other infrastructure is different, right? Freshwater doesn't damage cabling and steel and other systems the same way that saltwater does. But Jamie, do you want to comment on that further?
Thank you, Chair. Right, I think the point we were making is the way that we want to look at resiliency is it's not just about one hazard. We had an extreme weather event from Ida, which was heavy rainfall, but as the Chair said, we also have coastal flooding to be concerned about, but also other forms of climate-related hazards, and we need to think about them all together. So in the short term, we're looking at the stations where there was heavy flooding after Ida, coming up with remedies for that, working with city agencies. And in the longer term, we're going to be looking at the broad questions about resiliency, which is about our stations, but also about the neighborhoods that they're in, and be able to have some comprehensive thinking about that.
All right, we move on. Right in front of you, Jano, is Clayton Gusa of the New York Daily News. Clayton.
Hi, Jano, and congrats on your confirmation. Two questions we wanted to hit on. Eric Adams this week released a blueprint to crack down on gun violence. A key part of that was spot checks at transit stations. Do you have any information on what riders can expect by way of spot checks for guns? And along those lines, is the Bridge and Tunnel Police going to be engaged in any kind of crackdown on any potential gun running that's happening across your bridges and tunnels? And I have one more question.
I know that there is the so-called Bridge and Tunnel Officers, which is a small force, is definitely in collaboration with the state police and the NYPD. That is a constant. What tends to happen is when information, becomes available about that there's something going on which is going to lead to some contraband crossing a bridge, they will sometimes ask our professionals, and Danny DiCrescenzo is here sometimes, so he can add to this, to intervene, to actually become the place. I mean, we don't have toll booths anymore, but frequently we are the place where they elect to intervene. Danny, do you want to add?
I think the chairman said it well. We work with our city and state partners and the state police and NYPD, and they notify us if there's anything that we need to be aware of, be on the lookout type of BOLO type of situations. And like I said, we work very closely with them.
And part part of the reason that we do it is that we have so many cameras on the crossings that we become a place that you can actually intervene. That was what happened in that episode that was about a month ago, where notice came, and it resulted in somebody who did have a gun being stopped right on the bridge. Remember, it was in the RFK. So that kind of collaboration is something that we have a lot of practice with, and we're going to continue.
Okay, and I have one more topic, but what should riders expect by way of spot checks at transit
Truthfully, I have not gotten into that, or we have not gotten into that yet with the NYPD. The NYPD is having, as you may know, a pretty intense week. This week they announced that they're moving to these train patrols. We've seen movement. We have normal and regular conversations with them. We have not gotten into the specific issue of how they're going to use the transit system to that. But we're thrilled. Anything that is going to bring more presence and more interventions in the system, we're comfortable with them. We absolutely will support.
Okay. And then Jano, does the MTA have data on how many workers who have contracted COVID since Omicron were unvaccinated? And last year you had said we don't want a vaccine mandate out of fear that it would worsen a crew shortage. But now you've had the virus spread like wildfire through a workforce that isn't as vaccinated as the rest of the city. So do you still think that not having a mandate for the workers was a good idea?
I'm thrilled that you're getting into the question of the causality relationship between our vax policy and our ability to put on service, and kind of a little bit shoot first, ask questions later, with all due respect. But it would have been nice also if, in writing about our efforts to protect our workforce, it hadn't been suggested that we didn't provide adequate PPE. We provided 10 million. Clayton, you know this, and it's a hot button for us, so I'm going to say it to you again. If we're talking about COVID and what the MTA has done to protect its workforce, which is the nature of your question, please don't let somebody accuse us of not providing N95 masks again, please, without asking us, because the 10.4 million N95 masks were provided to our workforce. So I'm going to start to respond to your question by saying, please don't let the discussion of this issue enter into untruthful territory. It's not your style. I don't want it to be any of us. The question of the causal relationship between our vax policy and our crew shortages is pretty complicated, but I'll tell you this. Number one, where our vax rate, depending on what you think, is probably 10% difference than the uniform city services. They had significant reduction in availability because they have a ton of people who are not working because they didn't comply, right? Or they've claimed exemptions and so on and so on. So they had crew issues. We saw it when we couldn't pick up garbage, right? We elected to have a policy that brought us to 80% vaccination and allowed us to continue to put on service, which we did successfully right through Omicron to 472 stations, while the supply chain in the aviation industry was, I wouldn't say collapsing, but certainly coming apart. Okay? So that was the choice we made, and we thought that this episode bore us out really successfully. So we're happy to answer questions about these things and continue to probe exactly. But the fact remains, we chose a high rate of vaccination, plus we were able in the middle of Omicron to provide 700 testing locations to our workforce. That, as you calculate, or as we talk about the relationship between our policy and our workforce's health, please bear in mind 700 locations for our workforce meant they had more access to testing than any other group in our society. 700 locations. So that enabled us, in addition to having 80% vaccination rate, enabled us to keep a pretty safe workforce and to keep putting on service. We're happy with the outcome, but I know we'll continue to have this dialogue.
But was there a difference in the number of the rate at which people were testing positive who were vaccinated versus unvaccinated? That's the question.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm sure you're in dialogue with our press team about whether the data is available. I just don't know the answer to the question.
All right, let's move on to Dave Colon from Streets Blog to close us out today. Dave, good afternoon.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. Hey, Jano.
Hi.
In terms of this extra new money from the governor that you're saying is going to keep the fare hike from happening. Is there any other material benefit to riders in terms of more service with that money, or would you need more money for that?
Okay, well, we're right now providing close to 100% of pre-COVID service for 50% of riders. So we think we're providing good service and, more service. So we can hypothesize what we would do with the extra money. The first thing we're going to do with the extra money is make it unnecessary to raise fares. And then obviously we're dealing with the long-term structural budget gap. So those are our priorities right now, and we're comfortable that we're putting on a fair amount of service given the ridership. But we always look closely at it and continue to adjust as hopefully people come back.
And then last time we all got together, you had broached the subject of funding the MTA like a essential service, fire, police, sanitation, things like that. This year's budget doesn't quite do that. Didn't have a new revenue stream in it yet. And when I asked Bob Mujica about it on budget day, he said we have time to deal with this because the cliff doesn't really come until 2025. But don't you guys have to move a little bit faster, have a sense of urgency on it if you want to plan for things like more hiring, more service, more transit in general, and get and know what a new revenue stream is going to be before it's 2024 and we're sitting here on December 31st. I'm going, hey, what's the deal with this?
Jose told me my catchphrase is it's a fair point, so I'm going to use it with you. We do plan. We have been talking to the legislature and advocacy groups and stakeholders about the need to deal with the structural deficit long before the 2025 cliff. So yes, it definitely did not have to be dealt with this year, but we are conveying to everybody that we expect and hope that there will start to be action on it in the next budget year, at least.
Is there a number that you're hoping to get?
It has to do with a lot of things about, and our position in dealing with the legislature and the executive is that we're not telling people how to do it. We're saying this is the nature of the gap. Work with us and tell us how you propose to fill it, because they have a lot of other variables about which taxes and which programs they can provide money from. And we're going to be deferential to them. We're going to be agnostic on which source, but we're going to keep telling people we have a structural deficit in excess of $2 billion. It's attributable in large part to the ridership impacts of COVID. And as we showed, this is an essential service that ought to be funded that way.
All right, thanks everybody. Thanks Jano, Sarah, Phil, Danny, Jamie, and good afternoon from Lower Manhattan.